And welcome back to the bench here on episode 12, and I am joined by Speaker of the House, the Speaker of the Mole People, President of the Mole Party, Growl, Keeper of the 15s, but not even on a Resto Shaman, as he was able to get 15s done on a Disciplined Priest. How have you guys been doing this week?
Doing fantastic, doing some big keys.
You got an injection. Like, what is this?
Yeah, I don't know. We put together a team. Turns out that it doesn't matter anything about anything. If you have a team to play with and you're doing high keys, Mythic Plus is the greatest season it's ever been. And if you don't, it sucks.
Squishy, how are you, bud? You're muted. I'm sure you're great, though.
Yeah, I am great, thank you. I'm awful now that I realized I was muted. But,
Yeah.
Mythic Silken Court, what a fight that is. What a fight.
Are you on Silken Court, Growl?
No, we had a little bit of complications so last week we happened to lose both of our tanks, and so Drogo is now on his fourth main character of the tier, and he's playing Prop Paladin, and then we've recruited Chow, longtime friend of the stream, he's our other tank. But unfortunately, we had some other players who were not having very much fun in the raid, and now we've lost 2 more players this week, and we have raid tonight.
No.
And I think we're still figuring it out, so looking forward to that. I haven't even looked at our Discord, so yeah, I think we're 100 and something pulls into Kaiveza. I don't know how accurate it is because we were like messing around and we were pulling with like 18 and doing some BOE farming when like someone was late, but. Yeah, it's Kaiveza's fun though. I've actually had fun with Brood Twister and Kaiveza so far, so I don't really mind so much. But I think I'm about to enter the wheelhouse of pain in Queen's Court. I was looking at the Dratnos video, and it does not look fun.
Squishy, okay, let me pitch you a story time, and I want to hear your thoughts on what you would do if you were a part of this guild. So last tier, a year or so, one of the hardest tiers of all time, an unnamed guild, kills Tendril Sage Swift. Great. After 250 wipes, actually almost 300 wipes, they were able to kill Tendril Sage Swift. After Tendril dies, a mini revolt happens inside of said guild, and they lose a lot of their players, forcing them to be forced to reprog Tendril Sage Swift. 500 pulls required for 2 kills of Tendril Sage Swift before Fire Rack progression begins. Now, coming into this tier, something similar happens on Nexus Princess Kaiveza. A guild, many pulls deep on Nexus Princess Kaiveza, loses multiple people, and they have their fearless leader have to reroll to their 4th character of the tier and recruit a friend of the podcast to be able to tank for them. What would you do if you were in said guild's position?
I would talk about it on the podcast to get some support from the viewers. Just read the comments because they're going to be such support of our troubling times right now and how hard it is to be a streamer. So I think that's about what I would do.
Oh, word.
Really? Because everyone in my Twitch chat just types like Monka S point right Drogo and Rage Timer anytime someone makes a mistake and Drogo gets angry. There was one where I don't remember what it was, but it was Kaiveza, where you just clearly see them running the line in the complete wrong spot, and you just hear Drogo get madder and louder, and then eventually his mic peaks and he just fades out like he exploded.
Oh, dude, I saw that clip.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh boy.
Our prog's been going great.
What's your best pull?
We got down to 5%, but that was like in rage. So that was in rage and like an okay pull. Like I think we had like people die and we B-res them, but for the most part we had most people alive. And I think that was why one of the persons quit, is because Drogo made comments about our damage not being good enough now that he has to tank, and that person wasn't happy with Drogo.
That goes so hard, actually.
So you guys can follow along the saga of our great guild and all of its drama on Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, and probably Thursday and not Sunday, and I don't know our raid days. I just wait till I get pinged.
In other news, unfortunately, you can no longer exploit Silken Court or Nexus Princess Kaiveza because there was a hotfix dealt to this ability that you can buy with Honor. It was called Web Pull, and it could target bosses in both Raid and Mythic Plus and brick them potentially. This, thank God, got fixed, but I saw a log of some guild that had like no damage happen to them at all from like 25 to 0 on Silken Court because somebody bugged out their boss.
Yeah, it worked on every boss, by the way. Somebody did it on Brood Twister Heroic. and it just makes him do absolutely nothing. There was a clip of a person using it on Mistcaller and Mist Eterna Scythe. You can use it during the guessing game cast, and then no intermission happens. So yeah, a pretty abusive item. I think this was pretty clear cut as to an exploit. We'll see what Blizzard does with it, but there have been allegedly some OCE guilds that have used this to kill some bosses last night, so we'll see what happens with that.
I think that they'll do nothing. Now, I think that they should do something, but I suspect that Blizzard will do nothing about this, similar to what they've done in the past with stuff like this.
Yeah, I maybe was guilty of doing some of this. I'm happy that it's fixed. Yeah, I definitely went into a run not telling my team about it. So actually somebody in my Twitch chat mentioned it, and we were in another heated conversation. They didn't really say much. They just said like something very vague, and I randomly like looked up the item and bought some before the run, and then we go into a miss, and I'm like, all right, I want to try. So I got a really big damage build. Let's just push the last phase. And so my team is like super skeptical, and like we barely get it anywhere close, and then I just yoink the boss and cancel the cast. Everyone's like, "Whoa, what was that?" I'm just like,
You're so dumb.
The funny thing is I was a priest, and so people kept thinking that I was life gripping. Like I had some sort of like Shadowlands legendary that could reverse life grip. And so then Dorky left our group, and we replaced with Evade on a Warlock. Dorky normally plays DK, and I would grip mobs and say that the spirit of Dorky is still with us as I'm like gripping mobs. And I was just doing it like stupidly, like gripping mobs into our group to like help group casters or whatever. But that was a very, very fun exploit. Unfortunate, we didn't get to see the true lengths of what it could do. Some things I was thinking about was like, could you grip mob or bosses out of the boss room to bug them? Could you, like, for instance, the first boss in Miss, could you grip the cast that does the DR and does the AoE at the beginning, so you just focus the boss from the very beginning? There was so many things I had on my list to test with this bug, but unfortunately I woke up today and I heard that people were using it in Raid, and so I knew that meant it's instantaneously fixed within the minute. So of course here it is, it's fixed.
The odd thing about this, I think just in general, is in Raid it's considered an exploit. In Dungeons it's considered clever use of game mechanics.
Hold on. I think in Dungeons it's also an exploit.
There's no more finesse to this argument. That is 100%.
All right, moving on. Topics for today. We're going to be reading some of the YouTube comments from last podcast. We had 950 whenever I started looking. We're also going to be reviewing the Dungeon/Gilded Crest change and looking a little bit at 1105. So 1105, the release date is next week, which I think caught me off guard. Were you guys? I'm a bit surprised to see that 1105 is already here.
It's fast. It's fast. I remember 2 months ago when they sort of announced this patch. Everyone was kind of like, confused because this was the beginning of the expansion. There was a lot of tuning that still needed to be done, and everyone is kind of like, what are you doing? And then now 2 months is in, and they're finally like, patching up, catching up with what they had messed up, and now they have this whole patch rolling out. I'm a little bit biased here because I played a lot of Hardcore Classic, and there's a lot of rumors stirring around about something about Hardcore Fresh, and there's just nothing at all in any of these notes, and I'm very confused. But other than that, I mean, it's just a lot of this stuff is just insanely positive, right? It's just a lot of, at least from a healer perspective, a lot of the tunings, or rather the changes, aren't really tuning. It's more just like helping free up the talent tree a little bit and giving people more options. There's lots of cosmetic stuff. There's like fun stuff to do. It's whatever. I think I would have liked a little bit more time to kind of play around with our characters and see how the meta develops, but already we're getting a big shift. But I don't really think it's a bad thing. I'm always in favor of too many changes versus having a stale nothing going on.
Yeah, I think that the content pacing of it is a bit surprising me. What were you gonna say, Squishy?
I was gonna say, what they didn't tell you, Growl, is they're adding a new support spec. This patch that's gonna shake up the meta again.
Oh boy, no Aug Evoker 2.
No, overall, I think it's gonna be great. I think there's some weirdness coming in next patch. For like Fury Warriors getting target capped at I think 5, or soft target capped at 5, which is gonna be an issue on fights like the little spiders on Queen Ansarek, stuff like that. So
were they not already soft target capped at 5?
I think they're at 8.
Okay.
So there's gonna be some weirdness there. There's also issues with like the Evoker knock cooldown. For Drakthir Evoker, it's going from 45 seconds to a minute because all classes can be Evoker. So even
Yeah.
for Drakthir Evoker, it's going to a minute, which makes Brood Twister an issue because Evokers knock on the 45-second cooldown. And a lot of classes can just be Drakthir now, but it's not as quick, but still faster than running. So like, it's a little odd. There's going to be some things that need to be changed, I suspect. But you can see that, especially for like priests and other classes that can go Drakthir, like, priests, they're gonna really like going faster and having the ability to stop knockbacks.
Yeah, I think I'll give it a try. I've been playing my priest quite a bit. I don't know how it's gonna be. Like, I feel like if they landed in a good spot with it, where it's not super OP, the fact that you can be Drakthir, because it is a little clumsy. Like when you're flying through the air, it's one thing if you're an evoker because you have a lot more instant cast. But as a priest, like when you commit to like gliding, you're losing time, right? There's not a lot of buttons you can press other than like if you have spatial or you're in like a rapture ramp or something. But yeah, I don't know. I think it's cool. I'm definitely willing to give it a try and see how it goes.
What else is actually in the patch? I saw Blackrock Depths. Is it like a time walking raid? What is this Blackrock Depths stuff?
It's a full-on raid. It's normal and heroic, and drops loot equivalent to the current raid.
It's a raid. It's an actual raid.
It is a full raid. They had raid testing for it. Like I know one person that did it. Because they released it alongside the raid tier, so I'm pretty sure most people are going to these fights blind. There's not much knowledge on it, but it is a full-on raid. You get some of the currency for doing it, to get some of the cosmetics, like the upgraded tier 2 sets, which you can see on your screen now. But yeah, it is a full-on raid. There's no mythic, so only normal and heroic.
This hunter one doesn't look too bad. I like this hunter mug. I don't know if I would have put it on a female panda, I guess.
Yeah, I don't know about the like bright pink purple kind of color.
The monk one. If you scroll down to the monk one, that one goes so hard. It is one of the best monk sets I think they've ever made.
The evoker one's ugly.
Okay, but they're gonna be dragons anyway, so it's like I don't know why they put it on a.
Listen, I'm using a masquerade. I'm using a masquerade these days as a panda. Sure. I'm a male panda all the time now.
Fair enough.
I mean, overall, yeah, I've kind of similar sentiments to Growl. I don't know if this is content specifically for me, just like as a player, because I kind of play the game in a different way than a lot of different people. But I think that just in general, it's like more content and a faster content pace always feels better. I'm kind of interested to see how some of the class tuning ends up shaking up the meta. I think that like the prop paladin changes are probably the ones that are the most interesting to me. If that spec actually ends up getting buffed, it could be, I see Growl over here doing 15s with the prop paladin, so that spec could get a lot better with the 20th anniversary patch. But
yeah, I think with the whole not for me thing, I'm always kind of interested. Maybe I'm just in a small pocket of Final Fantasy, but talking with like Evade and Psycho, there's some community of Final Fantasy people that just like, I know it sounds crazy, but like raid for fun or like do older raids or whatever. And I kind of feel like, like I bet these raids would be pretty dang fun if you like had a group of people that like go in and just have no idea what's going on and just try to figure it out. Like I feel like a lot of people who enjoy raiding in WoW would enjoy something like that, but it's maybe I'm just not tapped into that community, but I feel like nobody does that, right? Like let's say you're somebody who's like, yeah, I have a 620 item level guy. I just want to do this heroic raid and just like kind of do it blind for fun. Like, where would you even go about finding people to do that?
Exactly.
Like, no one really does it.
It's kind of my thought process too. It's like all of the friends that I have, if I go, yeah, what if we just went into Blackrock Depths and just like tried to prog this? I have a suspicion that it would either be like, it's probably would end up being like a little bit too easy for me, just for like something that I would find kind of compelling, which is part of the problem, because at that point too, then I would be like, what, pugging it in LFG, which is fine. Like I might pug it in LFG just to kind of see what it's about, just to kind of feel it out. But that's not like, I don't have fun whenever I'm pugging in LFG and no voice in in raids and stuff like that. That to me is like some of the least fun that I have in this game, and it's Personally, if I had to play this game as like a solo player and I was using LFG and I was never getting in voice with people, I probably wouldn't even still be playing the game. So, like, that's one of those situations that it's just like, that's why I don't think the Blackrock Depths is necessarily for me.
Well, to be clear, this is not like the old Blackrock Depths. They're making it more modern. Like they took the old raid and souped it up.
So
but yes, I completely
I
agree.
suspect it's going to be easy is the thing, right? Like I don't think that they want to make it like a difficult challenge for a lot of people. I think they want to make it like, relatively achievable for most people who want to do Blackrock Depths again.
Agreed. Because it's also a limited time, I believe. It goes away in the new year on the 7th or something like that.
Oh yeah, I saw that somewhere.
So it's only going to be around for a little bit.
The 6th.
But while it's available, I'm sure there's going to be people that are coming in, getting their tokens and their currency to buy the cosmetics and trying out the raid maybe once or twice, or maybe there's groups that farm it a lot. So more options isn't bad, and I think just having a filler raid, I'm sure most people will try it at least once.
I think
I'm gonna sound dumb here, but did we talk about this last podcast where Orlando Salvador, is that his name? The guy who was like either in charge or like high up in the creative like new weird stuff team that was like totally owning in Plunderstorm and all that quit?
You talk about
or
Kirby?
Not quit, either quit or got. We don't know I don't know the context of it, but he's.
You talk about Kirby AU, right?
Yeah.
He seemed like he quit and he took a new job at Riot.
Yeah,
I don't think we talked about it.
No, I don't think we talked about it.
It's kind of a bummer, right? Because the way I sort of see this is like, all right, here they go. They're cooking, here's their new, experimental thing. And on the back of Plunderstorm and Mop Remix, I would be more excited for it. But I'm a little, I mean, I don't know. I guess it's hard to know, right, how big of an impact this guy had or whatever. But I remember he was like, in one of the very higher ups when it came to doing this stuff for Plunderstorm, because he was in like the secret like tournament meetings or whatever when we did that. So
I think he was one of the lead experimental design team members. I think that was his official title.
Something like that. Plunderstorm, Mop Remix, Follower Dungeons, stuff like that.
Oh wow, he did the oh my god, he actually did the most recent shit.
Yeah, he did a lot of stuff, and like it feels like the 20th anniversary and whatever else comes from, in the 1107 or even like Plunderstorm 2 or whatever, kind of came off a lot of his work. Obviously, he has a team, but he was one of the leads on that team.
I mean, his team works on the mini patches more or less is what it seems like, right? Quite literally the experimental stuff where it's like, is this cool? Do you find this fun? Which
I think Grau played a lot of Plunderstorm, didn't you?
Plunderstorm banged.
I liked really, Plunderstorm really too. I thought it was a good game mode. Okay, so in other news, we've had some dungeon tuning and some Gilded Crest changes.
Blizzard has saved Mythic Plus. We talked about it last week. I said Blizzard wants you to network and make friends. They said, nope, maybe a little bit, but Blizzard, you can now acquire Gilded Crests from +8. Will people be happy? What do you think, Tunnels?
I do think that people will be happy about this, but I actually, and this might be a hot take, but I don't think that this solves the problem that I kind of brought up last week, where some people are going to be more or less like walled and unable to progress their character, and they're going to have
just new people, right?
Yeah, it's just
new people. Like, so someone I asked in my Twitch chat the other day, I'm like, so is everyone happy now? Like, what's going on? And like most of the responses were like, no. And then one specific guy was like, this is great. This has been so much better. And it's like, well, yeah, because you're the exact guy, right? Who was like at 8s and couldn't quite get into 9s. And now you can get all your Gilded Crests and gear up. And it's like, while that's not bad that guy can gear up, all you're doing is kind of pushing the goalpost or the bar around a little bit with this. And I guess to me, I don't really mind, right? Like, it doesn't affect, I don't think any of us, other than like making a few runs a little bit tougher. But yeah, I don't know. I don't really know how I feel, because here's the thing is I've heard a lot of people suggest things like having a tiered Gilded Crest system where like maybe you can get a little bit from the lower, but people are going to hate that. Like people already hate getting Gilded Crests when they're like 12 in a run. Can you imagine if you got like 5 in a run or something, even if you time the key and you have to do 18 runs to get one crafted piece? Like, people would be furious. There's no way. Like, I think people are just like grasping at straws here, like trying to get a hold of any possible drop of loot they can. But overall, I'm a little bit, I'm not really sure what to think about the whole changes, because they moved Gilded Crest to 8. And that was pretty much all they did. So it sort of softens that 8, 9, 10 jump a little bit. It allows people to get their hands on gear a little bit easier, especially people who don't have Gilded Crests at all, because their cap is huge, right? Like the more they
Yeah.
play, they can just keep farming up
So,
items.
I mean, my biggest issue was more or less the fact that there was a decent amount of like a subset of players that were like more or less stuck, and they were unable to necessarily get any gear to upgrade to be able to continue to progress. Moving these Gilded Crests, I don't think it necessarily solves the issue. You're leaving the myth track loot at 10, so they're not able to get myth pieces. I think that there was a lot of people that were getting stuck at like level 7 who would in the past actually be able to do, you know, fairly high level keys or be able to get portals. And I don't say fairly high, but like, you know, getting portals every single season, I guess, in the terms of this argument. But I think the bigger thing for me is more just like, I think a lot of people are going to quit before they actually are able to reach that chase goal because they feel like they're stuck. And I think that to me is like a pretty big red flag just in general, is that people are quitting before they're able to even make it there because, you know, the Gilded Crest process is too hard. And I think the dungeons themselves are probably the biggest culprit of this, is just like straight across the board. They are too like overly mechanical in like what is actually being asked of you to do, and it's like hard to do dungeons casually anymore. And I think that that's not something that moving Gilded Crests or honestly even giving people more gear necessarily fixes.
I think they farmed a lot of W's for not changing anything realistically.
What do people say about this? Well, like it's 95 comments.
I think this is a lot of they farmed a lot of goodwill. I don't think they changed their mentality of making gearing harder for this season. I don't think they like made the 7 affix any easier. 10s are not any easier. I think maybe after this like period of maybe a week or so, people are going to realize that they still don't have access to myth track gear or are still not able to do 8s.
I do think I think it's better, right? Like I think that, you know, people are going to be able to craft, but you're not going to get myth track gear from the vault. But you are able to craft myth track gear now, which should, in theory, and you're able to upgrade your 619 gear all the way up to, what is it, 626? 625?
626 for a hero 6.
So 626, you're gonna be able to move that hero track gear all the way up to 626, which in theory should be fine. But I think the bigger issue isn't like, I don't think that changing it from 619 item level to 626 item level, it does make it easier to time a 10. But I don't think it makes it that much easier to time a 10. I don't think it moves the needle that much personally. But I do think I think it's a good change. Like I'm not hating on it. I think it's I don't know how much it's going to change long term for people.
Man, I have to do a little bit of I told you so. I remember during the beta and like this whole talk about crests, right? You remember how much talk there was, there was that now tweet. Oh, you need so many mythic crests. You need 4 months of farming, blah, 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 blah. Just give me my crests. I just want to be at max gear. Like, why are you making the grind so long? And it's so funny that now actually you're getting so many people that are completely stuck, right? They can't even get into mythic crests. Their grind is so short, right? But they're just like, I can't gear, this sucks, I quit, right? It turns out that progressing skill is a whole lot less fun than progressing your gear.
Yes.
And when you're at 619, if you're one of those people that are like, oh, I'm stuck at X gear level, I can't move up. It's like, well, okay, you know, that's what everyone quote unquote wanted, right? Oh, you're max gear, you don't have to worry about gear anymore. Now you can spam keys and just focus on your skill and getting better and play your character. But it turns out that, well, actually getting gear and getting upgrades and stuff is the fun part. And I sort of understand what people are saying in that, oh, I don't care about that. It's just that I can't get into groups. My gear isn't high enough. And I think that with these big jumps, it sort of created this really interesting like segregation situation in M+, and it's always existed, right? There's the mists and there's the City of Threads 10s, right? Where if you're somebody who's 3k IO and you're just like, hey, let's just slam out a couple weeklies. What do? You sign up to the miss. You know, everyone else there is 3k IO. You just roll through the dungeon. You have a great time. And if you're somebody who has all their 9s 10 and you're trying to get, you know, your score or whatever, you're not getting into that miss because, you know, it's just taken up by a bunch of people who are farming either crests or weeklies or whatever. And so you're stuck in the +10 City of Threads with a full other group of people who don't have any 10s time. Then it's like, if you get a hold of that 10 miss, then you're golden, right? Because you can just list it in Group Finder and get free carried. But
yeah,
I think 12s have this now. I think 10s have this now, where it's just a complete separation of the has and the has nots. And I think that it's always sort of existed in WoW, but people are really, really noticing it, where you just spam apply to groups and you don't get in. And it's like, yeah, because that group is a farm group, right? They're that far ahead of you where they're not progressing on that key. And it feels like it's really hard to get into 10s or 12s or whatever, but I don't really, it just sort of, that's how it works in WoW, I guess.
Well, that's why it's important to list your own key, because then you can invite those 3KIO sweat lords that are trying to just do a 10 for a weekly key into your group. It's one of those things too that like you can apply for 5 keys at a time, right? And so it's going to be so easy for those people who are like way above average in terms of like score or whatever that's necessary for that key. Like once those players apply to their groups, that's the white whale. That's what we're chasing, right? We invite as many of those people to our group as possible, and then we try to get the free carry. And it's a weird situation, and it kind of feels bad for it to be like that. But that's kind of why I want the dungeons to be a little bit easier, because 90% of the player base exists in that 10 and below range. And I think that, for some of them, like you were saying, that chase is kind of important. But I think that, getting them to the point where the 10 is the chase, but it's possible to actually be able to achieve it, even if it does involve them getting overgeared for it, I think is more positive in my opinion. But I do understand, like from the alternative side, at some point you're gonna have to get good if you want the rewards.
Yeah, I mean, what Tettle said, like, I saw a bunch of this on Reddit. It's like, oh, why do I keep getting declined? Why do I keep getting declined? I'll list my own key. And then they'll do exactly what other people have been doing to them. Cherry-picking the top IO and cherry-picking the top eye level. Because they can. Like, that is literally it. Like, why you don't get accepted into keys is exactly what you are going to do when you put up your key.
You're qualified. It's not an issue of being qualified. You're qualified for that key. Somebody's overqualified for that key. Yep. It's like the entry-level job where you're looking for 8 years of experience, or like somebody who applies for an entry-level job, you were right out of college, and somebody who also applies for the entry-level job has 8 years of work experience. They are hiring the person with 8 years of work experience. I'm sorry. Like, that's just how it is. Like, also, Growl, what is this tweet?
I believe this happened the day of the either the day of or the day before the Gilded Crest change from 9 to 8. And I just thought it was funny that there was so much talk about where you should and shouldn't be able to get Gilded Crests. It was kind of like a meme post, but it kind of wasn't, but it kind of was. And it was basically just like, why talk about the bar of where they should drop? Like, oh, people are like, it should drop from 6 or it should drop from 7, or they should remove the amount you lose on deplete or whatever. And it's like, it sort of was just like a weird convoluted joke message, either like stop gatekeeping gear, or like, unfortunately there's always like people in WoW have this idea, and I mentioned this a lot in the last podcast too, that the best gear should come from the best content. But like everyone in WoW is so rewards driven, and they want the best content to be exactly what they're doing, and it's like everyone just kind of thinks. It's so funny listening to people talk, and it's the same with us too. Like, we're no different when I see phrases all the time like, oh, the casual player this, civilian that, or whatever. And people are talking about, oh, when the casual player has to make the jump from 9 to 10, it's going to be so hard. And it's like, who are they even talking about? Like, who is the, this mysterious casual player? And they're almost like sort of talking about themselves, right? They're like, I play the appropriate amount of time. Like, I don't have a guild. I should be able to do 10s. It's like, well, eventually you'll be able to do 10s. Like, everyone kind of does them at their own pace, depending on how much you're playing and how good you are in your network and stuff. And it's like, yeah, I don't know. It just, everything feels so arbitrary, and it's so funny watching the community sort of lobby for what they want. Like, oh, this is the correct level where the gear should drop because this is where I'm at. And it's like, that's sort of how WoW's always been. It's like that with class balance a lot too, of just like, it's not even about like making their class fun. People just want their class to be OP. And it's like,
I agree with that.
I get it.
Yeah.
Dude, Max, I was on one of like the tier list things where you had to rank your own spec, and Max was like, if you could do one thing to your spec, what would you do? And I was like, 30% aura buff. I don't care about my spec being fun. I want it to be good. Like, which is just the truth. Like, I feel similar. It's just like, I'd rather I'd rather play, even if it's something that I find a little bit less fun, I'd rather get invited to groups like whenever I'm applying or be that meta FOTM spec or something like that without too much friction. And it's like, I know that not everybody feels this way, but there are a lot of people, I would just rather play than me sitting in Dornegal waiting for an invite. Like, so like in my mind, like I don't care. Can you do a 10 on any spec? Absolutely. But at the same point, like I want to be wanted.
It's so true.
It comes down to that pug mentality of when you don't know people, you want to make sure that you have the best chance of success.
Yeah.
And therefore, you're going to pick the people that you perceive to be the most overqualified.
Yes.
Best people, meta slave specs, in order to make sure that your key does not get bricked.
I also want people to recognize something. Like we in this call, we're part of like the high end of World of Warcraft just in terms of players. I don't think any of the three of us actually look down on like, you know, the more casual player base or the people who are like struggling in tens like that. I think that all of us we just kind of sit there and we can't necessarily relate to the situation that you're going through. I mean, I pug a lot of keys just in LFG and stuff like that. I've been trying to gear my druid recently, and I recognized that my 605 druid was not getting invited to anything, and then I started listing my own group. But like at the same point, we're not like looking down on your troubles and being like, yeah, you actually deserve it, just get good. It's not like that, for the record. We're just trying to help teach or explain why a situation is what it is and how to get out of the situation if you want to. Now, if you don't care to put in like that level of effort, I totally understand. Like there's always more effort or less effort that you can apply to something and then be in a better or worse situation. And it's ultimately it's also a video game. Like, dude, play for fun. Like, don't stress yourself out.
Settles just looks down at all the people. Bro, it's just a game, bro.
No. I think like, don't stress yourself out. Like, seriously.
No, I think Tettles gets in trouble. I get in trouble like this hugely sometimes. A lot of content creators do. But ultimately, what it comes from is like, I think a lot of the community, they're reaching out and they're complaining because they want things to change. And unfortunately, we've been around for a while and we know that change can be a very slow process or can be just missing completely.
Yeah.
And so the advice that we give isn't necessarily we're trying to teach you how to live with the situation and how to have a better time out of it if it stays, you know? Like we're not necessarily saying, oh yeah, 10 should be nuclear difficulty and you should need to have a pre-made group, right? But we're sitting, you know, our sort of advice when we talk about getting a group or making friends or pushing your own keys, we're like, well, if you're in the situation where you're enjoying Mythic Plus, you're happy with your character, but you're getting frustrated, this is sort of how you cope with it, right? We're not saying the situation is good. You know, I feel like people often, when they're sort of like, you know, writing comments or saying things, they're trying to effectuate change in Blizzard. And so when they see us come in and kind of say, this is how you deal with it, they sort of get angry, like we're excusing that the system is good or anything. And that's not what we're doing. We're not trying to say that everything's good and peachy. We're just trying to say like, this is the best way to go about doing it. And unfortunately, it's a little bit of a wow brain too, of like, you know, when someone comes to you and they're looking for, this is a very common thing in poker where someone is coming to you and they're not necessarily looking for feedback. They just want some emotional support.
You're venting.
They just want you to, they just want you to tell them that everything's going to be okay. And then you're like, I don't know why you played that hand. That was wrong. And also you should have bet smaller. You probably lost, you know, and you're just like trying to explain to, you know, your problem solving brain is on and your helping be nice brain is off. And generally as content creators, we're always in the helping brain because, you know, people are like, oh, what talent is best? What are you running this? You know, and we're always trying to problem solve and think about things. And then when it bleeds into situations like this, when maybe the correct answer is, don't worry, like Blizzard's probably going to roll out some nerfs. And once you get a little more gear, the 10s will be good. You know, if they're tough, just come back in a week. Even though that's what we should say, we're like, well, actually, you need to reroll the Prot Warrior. And you need to find a healer tank and you need to run the right build. And I feel like that message sort of falls on deaf ears sometimes, and it's also not quite the right message. So we apologize if we come off like that, but ultimately, you know, we're just nerds trying to fix problems. I think is the same message that Tuttles was trying to get across.
Yeah, I mean, dude, like, look, all my videos are also just like, yeah, these are how to actually do these dungeons. I know that it's going to suck, right? Like, I'm aware that it's going to suck, but if you want to do the dungeons, here's how. And and the process might be like too annoying. And I think that my biggest issue with the system right now for Mythic Plus is that I think it's hard to casually do Mythic Plus. Like, and I think that Mythic Plus is a system that this is the biggest issue that I have with Arena. I think it's so hard to casually do Arena, and I thought that Mythic Plus had this like really like nice well laid out situation where, you know, you kind of focus on your own character and you just kind of do your own thing. And you kind of need to know the mechanics of the dungeon, but you don't really need to know the mechanics of the dungeon as long as you know how to do damage and like play your character. This season, I don't think it's like that, and instead it's similar to PvP, where I have to know my character, and I have to know everybody else's character on my team, and I have to know all of the characters that the other team is playing and what they do versus my character. And I think that in Arena is like way too big of like a bridge to be able to like play casually. And I think that Mythic Plus is kind of starting to get in that similar situation where you have to know all of the mechanics of each and every single boss and trash mob inside of the dungeons. And I think that to me is like something that Blizzard should probably be looking to walk back a bit.
The funny thing is, though, even if they did, I'm pretty sure this doesn't change anything. It's just kind of the state of gaming, pug gaming in 2024. Like, I play other games, I play other MMOs, and the state of pugging in those other games, which I'm forced to pug because my friends don't play them, like Destiny or Lost Ark, is exactly the same. You take the overqualified people to have a quick run.
Yeah.
And you need to know the fights. There are trackers. How many times have you done this? You have to link an achievement. You have to link. There are external sites in Destiny that track how many times you've cleared the raid, how many times you cleared the bosses. Like, it's all the exact same thing as WoW, just not in WoW. And I think that's just kind of the, in a way, sad state of pugging in 2024, where you have to know the stuff to get in the stuff, and there's almost no way to start.
Yeah, I guess that's why people want like a solo queue, right? Because it's just easier, frictionless, like this is how I start. And then at that point, if I want to optimize it by getting better, I can. Does that make sense?
It's definitely weird. You know, it's one of those things where I just keep saying this over and over again, but it's just so freaking important with WoW. Like, it's all about the people that you play with and the groups that you have. Like, I think Tettles, I'm gonna say something right now, and I mentioned it a little bit earlier, and I think Tettles is like on the exact same board as me right now. I've been doing keys. I've been kind of playing a lot of characters, you know, doing whatever. I wasn't really so sure about this Mythic Plus season. You know, the affix, there was like, you know, kind of weird tuning. I was kind of on the fence. And then somewhat recently, our Drogo, our raid leader, switched to tank, and so he has a gear tank, and he's generally like on a lot, cool with playing with whoever, and we've been kind of playing with like him, Kihu, Dorky on DPS, and Terathal's Og, and for the we played a couple days, things went well, and now like for the last 4 or 5 days, it's like, okay, this is our squad. We log in and we play, and we're doing good keys. And all of a sudden, I'm like, wow, this season's great. This is so fun. I'm having so much. I didn't realize how fun the War Within Mythic Plus is. And to be honest, like, these dungeons are in it, but it's like, dude, this game is just all about the people that you're playing with. Like, Dorky has been in tank prison for years now, and Dorky finally is playing Frosty K, and I feel like he's having a lot more fun, unless he's on his Boomkin and he loses his Spy Masters while recording Potty C. Terathal is awesome to play with. He actually grew up right near where I grew up, and we've become really good friends. Like, Kihu's really fun to play with, and he's like the most degenerate EU guy who wakes up later than us. And it's like, it's just been a very, very fun time playing. And it's like, I'm telling you, man, all these people that you just want to go into Group Finder and pug and do, you know, look, if that's your MO, if you want to do it, I salute you. Like, it's a tough job, but if you can just find a few people to queue with that can change your mindset, or that, you know, think differently or have fun. Like Squishy was talking about Destiny raids, and everyone is just so objective driven. But I remember when I played Destiny,
True.
all my friends quit. And this was like very, very early in Destiny. I didn't really have that many people, but I love playing raids. And I actually, this is going to sound demonic, but in Destiny, I actually really enjoyed playing with people who didn't know what the hell was going on, and like helping raid lead and like helping people clear the raids for the first time. And I would redo raids that I've already locked out from where I'm not getting gear, and specifically look for groups of people that didn't know what was going on, and then just sit in there for 4 hours. And it was fun. Like, it was fun, like working together and like getting in voice with people that you never played with. And like, I would never do that in World of Warcraft now, but like, you know, just try and think, I don't know, like just try and think about what's fun to you and what you want to do, and like look for people, you know. And I feel like everyone's just, for them, fun is like they want to be max gear and they want to be rank 1 IO, and they don't care about anyone else, and they're better than everyone else, and screw everybody. And it's like, I don't know, I think just I know no one wants to hear network. I know everyone wants to press solo queue and they want to go into group finder and not say anything, but just really consider the idea of trying to find people to play with because it makes the game so much more fun.
Now, between Group Finder and finding friends, let's say you do, you want to find it in between. There are 2 Discord servers that I've heard of that offer non-toxic like collaboration for people who are scared to go into Mythic Plus. They were formed some time ago. There's one on NA and one on EU. The NA one is called WoW Made Easy, and the EU one is called No Pressure. I'll make sure Tettles adds these into the links after the video or below the video. But I've heard very good things from people who have experimented with these servers. It's very similar to LFG, except without, like you can set up for keys and stuff like that, but in an environment where there is some accountability and it is a learning environment where you can learn with people who are also in the same mentality rather than just completely throwing the dice in LFG. So that might be an option for people who are struggling currently this season.
All right, this is my call out of the week, asking for comments. What can we do, like, how can we help, Like, I feel like just making a Discord and being like, oh, this is the group finder Discord, like, that's never worked or whatever, but what could be a system that would work? Or I was thinking, like, it'd be really interesting to do some sort of event where it's like, we coach a team of like people
that would be
like,
sick.
Like imagine I've sort of been cooking this idea, but I'm like super content fried or whatever. So maybe we could do it as like a pod or whatever. But like, what if we, you had people sign up that are just hard stuck that have never timed to 12s but want to move up, and we just force them to play together every single key for a week, and we just schedule like 3 or 4 hour sessions a couple times in the weekend or whatever, and then just like try and see what they can accomplish or whatever, or like how like. I feel like there's so many people around that are just like, oh, I wish I had a group. I wish I had a group, but no one actually wants to stick around and do it. But like, maybe, I don't know. That was kind of all over the place with different ideas, but like, let me know in the comments, like what you think we could do or how we could help or whatever, because I just like, that's literally the whole reason that I started this stream and my stream and why I do WoW stuff is because like, dude, playing Mythic Plus with people is so fun, and making like I've made so many cool friends from Mythic Plus, and I really feel like a lot of other people will enjoy it. Like I think the fact that so many people suffer miserably in solo queue and just play Mythic Plus by themselves shows how fun it is.
I would have quit,
right?
I would have quit if I was playing by myself permanently, man. Like I don't understand how you guys are in the trenches every single day pugging an LFG. I literally would have stopped playing. Like, it's crazy. Dude, I think like a group like coaching sesh would be insane content, by the way.
Yeah, it's hard for me because stuff is going on, and also I've been pushing keys, but I've been kind of cooking around that idea lately of like, if we got some people who were stuck who wanted to go higher or whatever, because I see comments sometimes that are along the lines of like, I play with a group of friends and we're stuck, whether it's like we can't get the 9 to 10, we can't get the 11 to 12, and it's like, it's definitely hard, but like I know with some time we could turn those guys into owners if they're just like decent at their classes.
You could do it like Destiny, Growl. You could take a group and show them the ropes.
I think it's different whenever you're playing with the people too, as opposed to like watching over their shoulder. Because I think that like if I'm playing with the group, I can like shot call for them and like help them a lot.
Yeah,
just give them a little bit more structure.
There's a difference between being in the key and doing that versus doing a post-VOD review type thing as well.
I agree, yeah. Okay. Moving forward.
Don't talk about the tuning.
Yeah, there was dungeon tuning. So they made the bargains more powerful. So the buffs granted by Xalatath's bargain affixes has been increased from 20 seconds to 30 seconds. The Guile now increases enemy health and damage by 10% and was previously 20%. There was some dungeon nerfs to Necrotic Wake, the Gatekeeper, which is the mobs at the very beginning of the dungeon, the AoE that they do, the periodic damage has been reduced by 25%. The Skeletal Monstrosity now gives 4 more count from 20 to 24. The Bloody Javelins no longer stack. Surgeon Stitchflesh, his health has been reduced by 20%, which is a massive number. That is a huge nerf to a boss. The creation's AoE damage has been reduced by 30%. Skarmorak's health has been reduced by 10%. Skarmorak is now stunned for 4 seconds, which was previously 2 seconds after the shield has been broken. The Crystalline Eruption, which is the AoE damage from the crystals exploding, that's been reduced by 15%. And then there are nerfs to the last boss, which is basically just 10% health nerf and making the fight more melee friendly with reducing the cooldown of the circle puddles that spawned. I think all things considered, these were pretty positive changes to all of the dungeons that we've been seeing thus far. The Guile one, I think, is probably the biggest change, at least from my personal experience have been playing the dungeons. I think it makes 12s a lot more manageable, and I've no longer been in 11 prison because of it.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to break down here. So first, the changing the bargain affixes, so this is 11 and lower from 30 to 20. I don't personally know if I feel like they should have nerfed keys. However, if they did nerf them, I love this change because they basically soft nerfed all the keys from 11 and lower just a little bit, but they did it in a very, very fun way, right? They made it so the buffs are stronger rather than making all the mobs weaker. So I think you're really going to appreciate these new affixes more. A lot of people are talking about this heal absorb affix. I feel like this is one of the easiest ones.
Yeah.
And I think people don't realize that it's not actually a heal absorb. You just heal it off.
It's a dot.
I think
it's a dot that's attached to it shows up as a heal absorb on your frame because that
it's not actually a heal absorb.
Exactly.
A lot of healers have been very confused and they're like, let's say there's miss intermission and then the heal absorb comes out and they're like, oh no, dispel. But actually that's not right because in the miss intermission, you're healing a bunch anyway. So you don't need dispels to help you. You can heal your party and get them off at the same time. And so I think as long as you're not playing a healer that is not very good at healing and a party that doesn't have any dispels, I think this is the easiest affix they've made so far. This definitely makes you go faster in the key now that it's 30 seconds. The Xalatath Guile changing from 10, I think it was very, very, very obvious that the jump from 11 to 12 was too much. A lot of people who were, again, this sort of in the trenches pug people got stonewalled at 11. I've never seen people get stonewalled so hard at 11. I was watching one Azeroth TV. He's a Blood DK streamer, mostly streams on YouTube. And it was really, really funny because the pug community at 11 had essentially given up. They basically what they do is they go into keys that are 12s and they just hope their team is insane. And if their team isn't insane, they just leave. People make I always hear leavers and M+ or whatever. And generally, I don't think that's a problem. But if you watch people do 12s, they would do the first 2 packs. And if their team isn't insane, they would just leave. People would just straight up a minute and a half into the key. Yeah, I could try, see you guys later. And they would just leave. So one Azeroth TV actually attempted 12 keys in a row. And he did 0 of them. I think his 21st key was the first one that he upgraded, and that was after the nerf. And he's it was too hard. Tanking and not rage quitting and generally trying. And so it was very, very interesting to watch that. So I think the jump was too high. I have a problem right now with the damage scaling in high keys, and I wish that keys did less damage and mobs were chunkier and it was more about your route and dealing damage. I wished that they would have used this jump opportunity to instead remove the damage component and leave the health one there. I think that would have accomplished similar in regards to difficulty, but it would have fixed the scaling. They're very certain that this needs to have a damage component on it, so they didn't do that. So I think the bargain changes was a huge win. I think the Guile changes was 100% necessary. It was a 12 key only thing though, so I think this was low on their priority list, and they need to make sure they take care of everyone up to 10s before they worry about us.
Yeah. This is
overall, I think this is good.
This is getting stuck on Mythic Brood Twister. This is actually what that kind of is in equivalency, where it's just holy shit, it was way too much. Could you do a 12? Yes. Most people you were not getting to a 12. It was impossible.
The jump is still pretty significant though. It's still not easy out there to jump from 11s to 12s and pugs. But I think this at least lets you get your foot in the door. And the kind of other funny thing about it too is it's actually, if you're a person who's doing 10s and 11s in Group Finder, it's pretty easy to come about on a 12 key, right? It's not like getting a 12 miss or a 12 Ara-Kara is that crazy just because of how much, if you're at that point where you're taking stabs at 12s, you pretty much have 11s on lock and you can keep, doing keys and re-rolling and trying. So I think I just think that the biggest tough part is, again, if you don't have that group, people have this mindset of just trying to luck into the right group, as opposed to, all right, I'm going to hunker down and I'm going to deplete 50 12 keys this week and get so much better and learn from my mistakes. No, fuck that. You're just going to queue, and every single time you're just going to hope that you're getting Dorky's alt tanking for you so you can get your key. We had a guy come into my chat yesterday who says, hey, can you help me with my Siege 13 key? And of course, Dorky's an idiot, so he just invites me to the group and then applies to the guy's key. And then we look at him, and he had only 2 11s timed, and one of them was a 2-chested miss, and then he got a 13 siege. So he has no timed 12s, 2 timed 11s, and he just has a 13 siege in his bag.
Did you time it?
Just no.
Oh, okay.
No.
Dude, I was about to say that is the biggest, that is the most incredible story ever if you timed the key.
It wasn't as bad as you might thought, but there's just a lot of people out there doing keys, and it's just tough because it feels like you're way better off just like mass gaming and hoping to get lucky with your group. But again, I think spending time trying to improve and like picking out the 1 or 2 people that were good in your group to try and do more keys, I think is the way to go if you want to move up there.
Yeah. Moving away from the guile to the other nerfs, like the crit one and the haste ones feel good, I think. And 30 seconds of that is going to feel great. The cooldown reduction one feels just odd. It doesn't feel like it does much now it's 15 seconds of cooldown reduction every time it pops, which isn't negligible, but it's just like, it's hard to feel the impact of that at times.
It depends on your spec. It really depends on your spec, and it depends on what you're playing. Things like a Holy Paladin or like an Enhancement Shaman notice it a lot. Like a Beam Hunter would probably notice it a lot as well with like Barb Shot CDR. But then you log into a different spec and you just don't notice it as much. I will say these bargains are overstated, like very overstated for the value that you're getting. Like you get a ton of secondary stats from these.
I mean, in terms of feel though, it's easy. You can notice the crit buff, probably just seeing a lot more crit. You can definitely feel the haste buff. You can kind of feel the cooldown reduction, and I'm pretty sure most people cannot feel the mastery buff at all. That mastery buff is invisible. I mean,
Leech is mad OP. Like it is
Leech is definitely very good. But the mastery is just kind of like unfelt, but like I'm not complaining. It's clearly working. You just gotta have to trust that it's working.
Most specs as well, their mastery makes them do more damage whenever they're in XYZ, right? Most specs don't have like tangible scaling with their mastery where it changes their rotation or something like that. Whereas haste is a stat that is generally more felt than seen on the damage meter.
Yeah, I do think I do want to echo that idea that they're 100% like overstated, right? And I think that's a pleasant surprise. Like that's always been this pushback ever since the what was it, the
like Shrouded
stat buff at the end of Shadowlands.
Shrouded,
Shrouded,
it's Shrouded. It's like
we're
very
like
similar.
This affix was great, and they were like, this affix was too fun, and you were too powerful. We need to not do this again.
It's like wait a second,
and then they give us Thundering. Yeah, exactly. And I think that this is a very, very pleasant surprise. And I don't know, again, I don't know if I'm biased just because I've been playing with people, whatever, but I think all things considered, all of the affix stuff is in a pretty dang good place. And the last sort of like area to think about that everyone is talking about that I'm not really sure is the timer one, right?
Is the Peril,
the increased death timer, but I'm still not really sure about that one.
It's less the affixes to me. People talk about the affixes a lot because that's an easy boogeyman to be like, this was new. Yes. This is the reason that it's so hard. In reality, dude, this is kind of on Blizzard. Blizzard just made the dungeons too hard, straight up. Like, why do mobs white swing too hard? Like, why are there so many mobs with a bunch of casters inside the packs? Like, there's pulls. Hold on, let me pull up 3chest.io. There is a pull that is in the beginning of City of Threads here. What is this pack? It's a Herald, a Silk Binder, and a Silk Binder. This would require you to have quite literally 8 interrupts to be able to get all the casts kicked here. Nobody's got 8 interrupts. Like, there's so many of these like landmine pulls that you just don't know are completely off limits unless you've like done them a couple of times. And it's just like one of those situations that, oh, okay, I accidentally body pulled this Harvester Bowbreaker Soul Cleaver pack, and my tank just got evaporated off the planet. My bad. Yeah. Like there's just a lot of those kind of pulls, and I think that Blizzard's actually doing a good. Funnily enough, circling back to the tuning of the dungeons, if you asked me the most important things that Blizzard needed to nerf, Skarmorax and Surgeon Stitchflesh were like top of the list for me for things that probably needed to get nerfed. I think that these two bosses sucked real bad.
Yeah, I think Skarmorak probably might have been the hardest boss they've ever designed ever in Mythic Plus.
It's Hakar too! Hakar too! He's back!
Tuning-wise, it's like, you know, you could say that other bosses were more OP or whatever, but just the things that you need to do, like having CDs at the right times for the right shields and like killing the crystals, but not killing them too fast, but making sure you kill all of them and then having healer. And it's just like, it is so much. Like that boss is, I get that if you're doing it on a lower key and you're kind of over gearing it, you just blast through it and you don't really care that much. But that boss is like, for a boss that doesn't really have like one shots or any unfair overlaps, that boss is like definitely just insane difficulty.
Half as many crystals. Just like these nerfs are incredible. I think that these are absolutely massive nerfs. Like a 10% health nerf is huge. This is a 4.5 to 5 minute fight on like the plus 12 key level. And I watch every pug ever wiped this boss because they killed the crystals too fast. One less crystal per phase. Like, please.
Yeah. I think they needed to slow down the boss more. But the problem is, like, if they make it so phases are like a minute 10 or a minute 20 instead of 50, then a group might only see one phase, right? Like if you're doing a 4 to 5 plus 8 key and you bloodlust it, like the boss might die at a minute and 20 or a minute and 30, and like you barely even care about
dude,
the
I didn't
shield
think about it
mechanic.
like that.
So that's what I think the problem with the boss is it just scaled so odd. But it doesn't really. Yeah, I don't know. It's just a really, really hard boss. But I actually want to highlight the changes in Necrotic Wake. I think that the way people played Necrotic Wake was so degenerate and stupid. The fact that you would have to get all 3 spears and then just use all 3 spears on Surgeon Stitchflesh. And I think while Blizzard sort of did it to themselves in tuning, I think they did a good job sort of saving the community here of not only reducing the boss's health, but also making it so the javelins don't stack. So they're basically like, look, now Surgeon Stitchflesh will be exactly the same as it was before, roughly, right? Except for you only need to use 1 spear, because the other bosses are really hard. Like, dude, the second boss in Necrotic Wake, that is an absolute pug killer.
Yes.
If you have a tank that isn't like super good at dealing with those mages, if you don't have like a Blood DK or a prop paladin, man, those mages just go off. Like, it is very hard to kick them, especially like when they're running in and there's a big stack of mobs. Like, and the other problem, honestly, a big problem with that boss, this might only be a high-end thing, is that the boss doesn't show who it's targeting when it bolts. And so you have no idea. Like, in a pug, you can't be like, oh, the boss is hitting me, I need to press a defensive because my team isn't going to kick, because you don't even know it's on you. It just hits you, and you just take half your health in a giant shield absorb. And if your healer is falling behind, there's like nothing you can do. So overall, I think being able to spear second boss in pugs, you could even spear second boss twice if you really wanted to, or like spear, Surgeon Stitchflesh twice and spread it out or whatever. I also think last boss is pretty insane difficulty as well. I'm really, really getting sick of last boss of Necrotic Wake. Yeah, I don't know. Again, this is bleeding into high key territory though, because I think these bosses aren't too bad. Like if you're under geared doing an 8 or whatever, I can see Stitchflesh being tough, but I think if you're saving up your CDs and doing the strategy, a lot of these bosses should not be that as tough. First boss also just does like 150% of your health randomly if you don't have a warrior to intervene you. Also, the last boss of Stone Vault, that boss, the health should just be reduced by 100%. That is the most unfun boss of the expansion.
That boss just sucks. Like, not a very good fight.
Yeah, the problem is, like, I feel like they were close, right? Like, portals jumping around the room and you, like, deposit into the portals and then, like, there's area denial. Like, I felt like they were really close to cooking on that boss, but holy crap, does that boss suck.
Yeah.
It's funny that you mentioned Surgeon Stitchflesh and Skarmorax, because both of them are just on timed cycles. And we know how the high-end Mythic Plus community feels about timed cycles on tyrannical bosses.
Yep.
Pugs are bitching about these bosses too. It's not even me this time.
It's true.
It's not even me this time.
Like, I don't know how you would turn Skarmorax into a percent-based health, but like, you could easily turn Stitchflesh into a percent-based health transition like they did Dread Captain Lockwood. And I'm pretty sure that would be a perfectly fine fight, and it would fix the fight.
Squishy, I have a question. You're better with numbers than me. If you were triple javelining bloodlusting this guy, this is just a buff to the boss, right? Like if
you're doing 120% damage instead of 160%, which is a 25% damage nerf. So his health was nerfed by 20%, so it's very slightly, but
Okay, it's a very slight buff. Okay, that's what I thought, but I wasn't 100% sure.
Very slightly. But I don't think the javelin even lasted the entire time if he was down, so like it probably works out to be equal anyways.
You would extend the javelin. Yeah. You would do a 2 into a 3, and you would extend the javelin the entire time.
Okay, so then definitely, like, if you're doing a 2 into a 3, it's not the full 60% the entire time. It's probably net neutral.
Okay.
It's close.
But I can't kill this creation still.
I mean, nobody does though, right? The problem with killing a creation is
it has too much health.
Well, no, I mean, sort of. The problem with killing a creation is you blow your entire load on just the guy, right? And then that sounded wrong. You do all your you deal all of your damage to the guy, and then you have this creation alive, and then you're like, oh, we should probably kill this, and nobody. All right, like we need to move on.
But before we end the dungeon stuff, just picture this, right? Imagine you're going through the first hallway of Stone Vault, right? You pull up all these mobs, you start DPSing them down, and then in an alternate universe, all the little guys die and bolster the big slam guy, and then the man slams and kills you all.
Oh man,
we were saved from that universe.
Oh, thank God, there's no sanguine.
Dude, that's why I'm trying to talk. That's why I'm trying to talk up these bargain affixes. By the way, is people are like, this healing absorb sucks. I'm just like, bro, do you know what sanguine is? Do you know what bolstering is? Do not complain about these affixes right now. I feel like these affixes are a huge dub.
I like the guile in that regard. Like, listen, if you're pitching me, yeah, you either have to go back to Segment or you get this guile. Oh, please, God, give me the guile. Give me the pre-nerfed guile too. Actually, I'll take that one as well. I'm tired of Segment, man. Please, no more.
You know, given the way that Everbloom went, I wouldn't be surprised if in that alternate universe, all those little scarabs in City of Threads just bolstered the
Shut up!
Everything.
Shut the fuck up!
How do you feel about those giant beetles and the big, like, tall, skinny man having just so much extra damage? Like
the skein spinner, the skein spinner in the Herald. Yeah, I don't know, man. Those mobs are terrible. All right, guys, we have some comments to read.
Oh yeah, so I hollered out at everyone to post some comments on the video about their experiences. Very interesting because now we have the 10 nerf, or I mean the 11 nerf. We have the Gilded Crest change. I remember everyone was in absolute despair about a week ago when we were recording this podcast. I haven't really been that tuned into Reddit and the community lately to see, but I think it's died down quite a bit. And I'm interested to read some of the comments here. And to be honest, I actually read a ton of them. We kind of talked about like how we wanted, if we wanted to bring him up or do like another episode or whatever. I think this works out good since this is still like a pretty interesting topic anyway. We can do a little segment where we read them out, but I didn't do too much responding, but I definitely read like a ton of them. So thank you guys so much for sharing your thoughts.
We were considering bonus episode. We landed on this instead. Squishy, I think you're probably the most prolific Reddit reader out of the three of us. How's the sentiment been on Reddit in the past week after these changes?
I mean, people were celebrating, I think. Although I think a bunch of people were kind of speculating that we'll see +8s are too hard for Gilded Crest, move them to +7, just moving the goalpost. But overall, I think people are happy right now. Reddit is no longer like filled with dungeons are too hard. Instead, we've been filled with my pugs aren't dispelling despite them being a dispel class, or my shaman isn't dropping poison cleansing totem. That's about been the Reddit for the past week with this dispel affix, but the crest stuff has stopped for the time being.
Okay.
Ooh, I want the second question.
All right, I'll start with the first one. 57 minutes, we were talking about the tank changes and how the tank nerfs making the healers more reliant. This is what that's hyperlinked to. This is why I was advocating for not nerfing tanks. Anything that creates a scenario with less tanks is nuclear bad for the entire population. Dude, I don't know if you guys have been noticing this too, but I've been trying to pug a little bit on my druid, and I'm like listing my group in LFG and stuff like that. I get quite literally 0 tanks or healers applying to any of my groups. Like, what is going on right now? Tanks are more scarce than ever, or like what is happening?
Yeah, tanking there are so few tanks right now. I mean, we're not necessarily making it better because we have Drogo and Dorky in our group, and Terathal plays a little bit of tanks on his ult. So we're hogging some tanks. I feel like the tanks are sort of banding together because they know that if they play with another tank, then maybe they'll tank and they can play some DPS. And yeah, I feel like people are migrating away from tank and healer more than ever before. And it might just feel that way, but man, does it feel like there's 3 tanks that I talk to now that I do keys with, and otherwise I'm not really playing.
I think a large part is just people aren't finding tanks as much fun. I don't mind tanking on my Blood DK, but like some of the DPS have just been so fun with hero talents personally. So I've just been having fun on other things, and finding a tank is hard at times. So
All right.
yeah,
All of these Blood Death Knights, you're not allowed to play Frost anymore. You have to go back to Blood. Stop having fun on Frost and go back to Blood. You gotta go back. All right. Grau, you wanted to take this one?
Oh yeah, so this is one that I was looking a little bit before. I'm an AOTC Keystone Hero Portal player that mostly pugs. This was the person that we're talking about in the trenches. My desire to log in has completely evaporated this season. The M plus changes have created an environment that is just stressful, feeling unrewarding, and frankly not fun. I'm more stressed over healing keys. There's the first tip. They're a healer than I am at my job that has real consequences if I fail. I accept that I'm not good enough for 10s this early, and that's okay, but the path to them has almost entirely eroded. So you kind of wonder, what's the trouble with the path here? I'm so dependent on my vault, or I have to farm 7s, which is just Russian roulette with pugs. There are no chill farm keys anymore. If I'm just waiting for my vault, why am I even logging in at that point? Which is kind of the one problem with gearing right now, is Myth Track feels a little bit drip fed, but now here we go. Also, something that I didn't hear mentioned was the change to AoE CCs. I used to be able to stop casts that DPS miss with In-Cap Roar or Typhoon, and there we can stop.
You're an Arresto Druid, right?
They're a Resto Druid. So I'm sorry to say, but that is your main problem, is you are a Restoration Druid trying to do high keys. Now, you're probably about 1 or 2 buffs away from being good, but unfortunately, not only are you a Resto Druid in high keys, but now you're stuck with only people stupid enough to play with Resto Druid in high keys, so that will be part of your problem as well. But no, I mean, all things considered, I think, yeah, I don't know. You know, I don't really know what to say about this. Like, I'm actually gonna, and I think this might frame some of the other questions here in terms of like what exactly they mean. But talking about stress or difficulty, I mean, the thing is, if you go high up in M+, eventually you're always going to run into a point where healing is like very, very tough, right? You just might not have been at that level before. But the problem is, in order to get the Myth Vault rewards, it's very difficult and stressful, right? And so I feel like you have to reframe all of these comments and questions, and maybe I'm kind of doing the commenters a disservice about the rewards, right? Like, you can easily just do random pug keys and have fun if you want to do Mythic Plus, but you're saying, I want to keep moving up, I want to keep getting the rewards, and these keys are very hard and stressful. And it's like, well, you know, Blizzard kind of wants it to be that, but I mean, yeah, again, this is sort of what we talked about the pug minefield, and like, you know, if you found a group and a couple people to play with that regularly to sort of prog through the keys. But yeah, I don't know. I think this commenter, maybe I would have liked a little bit more specific as to why, like what they found stressful or whatever. But unfortunately, like, yeah, the difficulty is just very high. Like keys are very tough, and they want them to be tough if you want to get mythic rewards. You know?
Just to give a little bit of pushback though, it says there are no chill farm keys anymore. If I'm just waiting for my vault, why am I even logging in at this point? I think that this is probably my biggest issue with the system for like that I noticed for like the average players, is that it, like you're saying, it is so difficult, and like these people can get better, but most people don't have aspirational goals of getting better. They have aspirational goals of getting gear.
Well, right, exactly. Yeah, but exactly, right. So this comes down to 10s are too difficult and too stressful, right? Like that's basically what they're saying. Like,
which I agree with.
It's too difficult and too stressful to get Myth Track gear.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, while I don't necessarily agree if this is good or bad, right or wrong, like this is what Blizzard wants, right? Like Blizzard does not want Myth Track gear to be something that you go into M+ and you get for free.
Squishy, you want to answer this bottom part? I would love to see one of these guys go out and undercover solo pug and see
No,
what
I'm going to
walls
take
they
this one
hit?
too.
Okay.
I'm going to take this one from Squishy too. I always see this about like, you know, this sort of comment, like, I'd love to see these guys pugs. Like, where do you think all of us came from? Like, you think I was just born and I had all these people on my friends list and I was doing plus 30 keys? Like, no, I pugged and moved my way up. Like, is it because I'm a huge sweaty nerd and I cared way too much about getting good and I also like spent way too much time on this game? Yes, of course, right? Like, if you don't have the ability to do that, then you're not going to move up. But at the same time, I mean, all of us, like, you know, I think it just comes down to your tolerance for pugs not like failing, you know. Like, I think if you just keep pugging keys, like eventually you're just going to get really freaking good, right? Like, you're going to get really freaking good. You're going to meet people, like you're going to be blasting people on the meters, or you're going to have really good routes as a tank. You're going to be saving people as healer, and you're just going to have a big impact on the keys that you're in, and you're going to be able to move up, right? And I think that you just, if you want to move up, you're just going to have that tolerance for just failure, you know. Like, you can't go into every key, you know, like I was talking about with the 12 keys, right? You can't just go into every key thinking that like this better be the one that I time, or this is a waste of my time, you know. Like, you have to just go into a key and think like I'm going to try and get better. I'm going to really focus on playing well and like learn from my mistakes, and the results come eventually, right? Like, it's not like you're in prison doing this for 3 months, right? Like, if you spend 2 weeks, you know, playing a lot of M plus and really just being critical about your play, you're going to get way better.
Yeah.
Also, don't play Rest of Druid.
I mean, I don't pug in WoW. WoW is the one game that I don't pug, but I do pug in other games, and I totally understand the frustration there because I feel it. But there are a lot of strategies that you could do to try to make yourself seem like a more, you know, acceptable pug. Class is obviously a hard one to overcome, but things. This JB tweet is
Fresh one.
You linked this in our group chat.
Yeah, it made its way to Reddit. So JB tweets, people ask me what to do if they play a non-meta spec and can't get invites, and the answer is you have to keep applying, because there are some fuckers out there that are just into really weird shit. If someone out there is cranking at defeat picks, you can find a Mistweaver inviter.
Holy, I mean, questions just are these people that you want to be grouping with.
But yeah, I mean, back to the point. There are ways that you can try to make yourself seem more interesting to potential group leaders. Having cleared the content before, like usually the first week of pugs is the go week for pugs. People are going to be the most lenient and the most accepting of new players because nobody has experienced the first week. But the second that first week is over, all the walls are up and you need the experience to get into groups again. And that sucks. But it is the way that pugs happen in most games. That first week is the most important, and you gotta grind if you want to keep pugging going forwards. That would be my advice for people who do want to keep pugging going forwards. That first week is super important.
All right, next comment. Okay, I just want to rant about this. The problem isn't that I can't get myth track gear, it's that there's no progression at all. You guys bring up 7s. 7s are just as useless as 8s. Not anymore, but like whatever. Sure, you get hero track gear, but it's all the same item level as the champion track gear unless you can do 9s. I raid Tuesday night, clear normal in the first few bosses of heroic, and I'm crest capped. So the rest of the week, I have virtually no sense of progression other than my other raid night. The problem isn't actually on the high side, it's on the low side. Delves made Mythic Plus levels useless because of gear. The problem is now that where we are, the only fix is to change the in-game side because we can't go back to fixing the low end for the season. If there were no delves, we would be in lower level keys, getting upgrades still and feeling the progression. Now, I'm personally at the point where I would have to progress around 14 keys between 6 to 8 to the point where I would be able to get 8s for all of them. That would be about 14 keys of maybe hoping to get a single heroic piece that would actually be usable for me in the future. 14 keys is a big investment for casual players, made even worse by with the season's time changes. I suspect they're talking about the Challenger's Peril. Also made worse by the fact that there are players who aren't good enough to do the level of keys that we're talking about. Why? Because there are no rewards for them to do lower mythic keys. The gear/crests are not very useful. So instead of playing at the level they should be, they apply to keys that they shouldn't. And I can't blame them for that. There are some people who say this isn't a problem for them, that they can do these high keys, and that's fine. The problem is for Blizzard. People at these in-between levels are not motivated to actually play because the progression we want is far enough out of reach. Then that juice is just not worth the squeeze. 14 keys for me with virtually no rewards already making me feel like it's time to move on, and I'm a Resto Shaman. I can't imagine doing this on a non-meta class.
So I totally agree with the whole reward structure being off, the low reward structure being off at the start of the season. I completely agree with that. The fact that week 1 you could craft the Gilded Whelpling Crests or whatever the new version was, up to 590 made you completely skip the early level delves and mythic zeros. People had no reason to go into M zeros because you could just craft over that slot at a higher eye level. So I think that was the first mistake. Then delves dropping 603 gear and the ability for people to stock up on keys before the season started meant that people went into normal and heroic week when they should have been doing M0s, instead doing delves. And that gives you champion gear, which makes you skip all the low-end Mythic Plus. So exactly like this person said, I absolutely agree. I think the low-end dungeons were completely overshadowed by the upgrade changes and by delves.
Do you agree that the point of that they can't go back and fix the low end for the season, so they have to fix the high end? Do you agree with that?
I'm not sure on that part. I don't know what the solution is there, but like from the other point, I'm not sure what they should do there.
Yeah, I think this was one of the highest upvoted ones, and I think this is the comment that resonated with me with the most, in that the discussion that we maybe missed in the last episode was that just the item progression in general in Mythic Plus, like, okay, from a purely like skill and getting better at the dungeon perspective, I think it feels good to go from 2 to 10. But from an item progression, it does feel really, really weird, because you basically get to this point where you're going into 2s and 3s and you're like overgeared and they're still like pretty easy, just like how M0 was.
Yeah.
And then like, very quickly you get to 7s, 8s, 9s where things get like pretty tough and they don't really feel as rewarding. And essentially it's like, why even do anything but 4s, right? Like if you can get tons of hero track gear, right? Either from the easy heroic bosses, from delve maps, from your vault, like there's tons and tons of sources, the weekly quests from time walking, random end of dungeon drops, like you get so much random heroic gear from everything in the game right now. And then you can upgrade that just by spamming 4s. So the progression path is literally get stuck, spam 4s for however long you need crests to upgrade everything, and then try and make the leap up to get myth track gear. And it definitely feels a little weird. And I'm not really sure, for someone who just likes to move up and do dungeons and that, like, I think in general, the gearing system is better for almost everybody in the game right now, except for the person who's just like, I really like dungeons. I just want to kind of do lots of dungeons and play Mythic Plus and move up the ranks like that. I feel like the gearing system definitely feels bad and strange for them. And I think that Squishy is 100% right in that doing all the stuff that they did with delves and the maps and the keys and the crafting, like, really threw a wrench into what gearing was. I think there was a lot of little unforced errors that maybe were unforeseeable. Like, for instance, the crest cap, I think, started a little bit too early. And so like you could like farm up a bunch of crests and people were doing all this stuff. And I really feel like the gearing it feels weird. There's a lot of things about gearing right now that feel weird. Like, one thing that I think almost everybody who's now finally been able to get myth track gear feels is, okay, you have all this 619 gear from dungeons, and it's just a waste to spend any Gilded Crests on them, right? You're just waiting to get a myth track piece, and then whatever you happen to get drip fed either from your raid leader or from your vault, and then you just slam all your Gilded Crests into that piece, and then, oh, now I'm sitting here again, and it's like, you can have...
Wait, that's me! He's talking about me!
Well, I mean, that's everybody, right? That's everybody. Like, you can get a pair of gloves that's a tier gloves, and it's avoidance, and you're like, it's your BIS stats, but like, it's just a waste to spend those crests to upgrade them from 4 of 6 to 6 of 6 because you're just sitting there waiting for your myth piece. And I think all in all, the gearing system, I'm not going to say it's bad, but it just feels weird. Like, it just doesn't feel right. And I hope that Blizzard thinks about this and iterates more going into the next seasons and the next expansion for sure. So I think this post is kind of dead on with, he's just saying that the gearing feels bad.
Next post. Since Growl asked, Our guild is AOTC and working through early Mythic Raid. I'm about 2300 IO, and I really think that Myth Track gear should be from the Vault in 9s and Gilded Crests come from 8s. You get Hero Track gear at a 7, but there's no reason to do an 8 over a 7. And then the next reward is at a 9. We can time some 9s and even +2 some 8s, but 10s are more of a, we complete this once per week just for the Vault. And I gotta say, I think +10s are harder than doing the first few bosses of Mythic Raid, and the Mythic Raid feels like a loot shower in comparison to Mythic Plus right now.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with what they're saying. Like, and I think that's by design. Like, I think that they wanted the first couple bosses to not be super hard. They want people to get in there. I think that they wanted 10s to be difficult, and I think they wanted it to be a challenge. It does feel a little weird that like the highest reward from item wise and portals are on the same level. Like maybe. Yeah, I'm not really sure about that, but it does feel like portals are kind of like the, you know, the cosmetic only reward that you do if you want to push higher, but that's just like you just get them doing your 10s now for Vault. I am not really sure, you know, like to me, this is sort of moving the goalpost of saying that like, oh, I think everything should be slightly easier because I want it to be easier and I want easier loot, right? Like I sort of get what they're saying, but like, you know, ultimately I don't really have a stake in the game, but Blizzard does not want it to be easier right now. So I don't know how you guys feel about it, but they sort of compromised and allowed Gilded Crests from 8s. But unfortunately, like in a scaling M plus system, not every level is going to have like a purpose, right? Like to say there's no reason to do an 8 over a 7. Like, what's the reason to do a 3 over a 2? You know, like, like with a scaling system, there are going to be some levels where you're just sort of trekking up. So, but I do appreciate that there are a lot of people in this zone that feel this way, and it's like, yeah, this is definitely the person who's affected the most. Of like, you know, it's really a struggle to get out of 10, and it feels like, you know, to do an 8 out of 10, but it's also sort of just the way things are changed, right? Like you can, like this person's basically saying it is almost a not worth it task to get an 8 vault with +10 keys, but at the same time, like you're not getting an 8 vault in raid either, right? Like why should you get an 8 vault in Mythic Plus if you're only doing the first couple bosses in Mythic and you only have 1 or 2 slots in your Mythic vault, you know? Like I think that's sort of exactly the line that Blizzard is going for. And I mean, I just, you know, it's hard for me to comment if like, oh yeah, they should make everything easier because
I don't think they should have done that, but I do think they did what they were trying to do.
Right.
Yeah. On the topic of like Mythic Raid bosses versus Mythic Plus 10s, I think they're comparable in different ways. They both require an exceptional amount of coordination.
Yes.
Mythic Raid is more about the coordination of 20 people who are able to band together and stick together for a long enough time that they're able to kill bosses. Whereas a +10 is more about 5 people who are working in more close-knit, who have to communicate more and use their utility more on a moment-to-moment basis rather than the overarching aspect of raid. So I think they're slightly different, but they both require a level of coordination just in different ways.
What I will say is different about raid versus Mythic Plus is most of the time whenever you're going into these 10s, you're probably not in voice with people, whereas anytime you're pulling a Mythic boss, you're probably in voice with all the other 19 people that are in the raid with you.
True.
And so that creates like a kind of a little bit of a different dynamic for it. I've seen the equivalency sometimes that is like, well, being able to achieve the highest reward from Mythic Plus has been very easy in the past, and so it should be continuing to be easy in the future. That's not true. It was probably the hardest it ever was in Dragonflight Season 1. It was very easy for the other Dragonflight seasons, but prior to Dragonflight and Shadowlands and before, it was not easy to obtain the highest level of gear out of the vault or like the weekly chest to be able to get like the highest track gear. In addition to that, you actually didn't get the highest track of gear in Legion or BFA, or I mean, there was no even Mythic Plus prior to that. There was still Titan forging in the game, but even the chest was like 15 item levels below Mythic level gear. You just got the chest because it could possibly Titan forge a dungeon piece that you wanted.
And shout out it was a chest, not the vault. So you got one piece of loot randomly on any slot.
That was epic.
And Dratnos pulled the Get a EQ that Tettles vendored. Remember that?
Yeah, that was. He got unvendored. Okay, he got it back, but that was OP. He got that with what was it with Twilight Dev or something?
Something like that.
It was like Get a Twilight Dev or something. Okay. Doing 9s and 10s with an organized group is great, but pugging them is a nightmare. What if I want to play at a time when my key group is not on? It feels like such a waste of time pug into Necrotic Wake, and then realize that Surge and Stitch Flesh is not possible with that group that you're playing with. I'll take this one. I agree. I think that it's completely nonsense. Is this an issue of, like, I think that whenever we were talking about, like, yeah, you need an organized group, we were talking about that as, like, this is the recourse that you need to be able to take, right? This is how you're going to be able to do the 10, is that you get into a coordinated group. I understand that in the past, you were able to, like, pug, like, in the past being Dragonflight, the end of Dragonflight, you were able to pug into the highest level of content and actually be able to achieve that gear-wise or portal-wise or whatever. And I think that Blizzard has just made the dungeons a lot harder, and I mean, there might be some recognition that maybe that dungeon level isn't for you to be pugging. I agree that I think it's a complete waste of time. Like, I haven't been pugging as much this season as I have in the past, because I think that it is just, in general, I would rather do alt keys with some of my friends than sit in LFG and farm like a very specific piece because of the exact experience that you're facing. But I think in terms of, like, if you need to get the 10s done for your vault or whatever, or you feel obligated to get the 10s done for your vault, or you're chasing that portal, that's like the peak that Growl talked about last week. If you're trying to get that, you're going to need to wait for your group to get on. And I think that for a lot of people, it has turned out to be a waste of time, more or less. And I think that Blizzard has broken the progression of the system.
Yeah. I mean, I completely agree with that. Just to note again from something I said earlier, the difference between LFG pugging and Discord community pugging.
I agree with that. Yeah.
And again, I'm gonna recommend the two Discord communities that I have, one for NA, one for EU. Like, check the description for them, because even in other games, these Discord communities are a step up in terms of success rate, completion rate, stuff like that, and it's a lot less anonymous, so you'll have less leavers as well. So, highly recommend.
Counterpoint:
go into Discord.
What do you do about somebody who gets, like, bad social anxiety that doesn't want to get in voice with people?
You don't necessarily have to be in voice, right? Like, it's just mainly for finding people, I think. Like, at least my understanding of the way those groups work, even if you're not in the Discord, you can, like, put it in your description or your name or whatever of the group that you're listing, and then, like, there's, like, either, like, a code or, like, something, so you know that other people are a part of that community. It's sort of like like, you add WME to the title of your group that you're listing, and then you're sort of it's sort of like a secret broadcast to everybody else, like, hey, I'm a part of this community, like, are you as well? And so that way, it's basically just like a way that if someone is a bad person, you can sort of filter them out and remove them, so you have to worry less about getting stinkers in your groups, not in terms of skill, but in terms of, like, being rude or leaving or whatever. Like, I don't think you necessarily are forced to, like, be in voice. You can, but I think it's more just like a reputation system for Group Finder, if you would, like an opt-in rep system for Group Finder.
Yeah, I can't speak specifically for these, but I would say there's probably groups that have, mics that want voice, and there's probably some groups that don't care.
Yeah, my experience, I think, is usually you may struggle with, like, 9s and 10s. Like, I think generally it works a lot better for, like, lower level keys when you're trying to, like, learn the dungeons rather than doing 10s. I could be wrong now, but that's sort of my impression. I remember when I looked into it. But I will say, as to sort of add into this, it's simply the case that we're early on in the expansion, and Mythic Plus is a mini game, and Blizzard is just now getting to fix some things. And so, for instance, this specific thing that this person mentioned, right? Like, they're nerfing this dungeon in the next reset. Like, they realize, hey, this was too hard. We meant for things to be hard, but this was too hard. Like, we're gonna give you guys more spears to sort of make these other bosses easier and to make this dungeon more flexible, right? So, while it is true that, like, if you have a coordinated group, you can overcome some of these challenges, like, it's just early in the season, and there's some things that they're fixing, and hopefully with the changes that they're making, making the bargain give you more, fixing some of the bosses that are really tough, hopefully you see these, like, insurmountable pug challenges sort of be able to be overcome, because who knows, right? Like, how many necrotic wakes and pugs have you failed just because of this one boss that is getting nerfed again, that hopefully your success rate will go up a lot. So unfortunately, again, early season Mythic Plus, it's just going to feel really bad, and you're going to run into some really big pug walls. It just sucks that it came at the same time when they also made the rewards harder, so it feels like, okay, this is just, I can't even do this in pugs.
All right, Squishy, you're gonna have to respond to this
All right.
one.
Yep.
If
I read this one. I read this one, and
Yeah.
I didn't even remember what Squishy said, but this had a lot of upvotes, and this guy was not happy with Squishy, so I'm really interested.
All right, Squishy, you gotta read this one.
Yeah. If you carry through the thought process expressed by me on keys to raid, then there is no need to nerf raid, as I said is needed, because multiple groups are able to clear mythic raid in its initial state. Hence, I just need to get good. Truthfully, yes, I do need to get good.
What did you say? Can you go back as what you said last time? Because I don't even remember what this guy's talking about.
I think I'm not 100% sure, but I'm pretty sure it's just the idea that like they wanted things to be harder, and a lot of people are just not ready for that. I think, and like people are just bad at not pressing their buttons. Their DPS is like 400k, like, or not pressing dispels and stuff like that.
And then what? Talking about Brood Twister and Nexus Princess needing nerfs, and them saying that.
I mean, we started the episode with that essentially, and I mean, I agree. I do need to get good. I haven't pushed above 10s because I don't want to, and I know that I'm kind of washed up for once I once were. Tettles used to invite me to keys as a tank. Now he doesn't anymore.
Well,
but in reality, like the way I see it is Mythic Plus was designed to be harder. Now, is it where Blizzard wanted it to be? Judging by their nerfs currently, the answer is roughly yes. And for raid, judging by where the interviews have told us they want the raid to be, the answer would be no directly after Race to World First. In addition, I think what I was saying is, I mean, I play boss rush games, I play difficult games where I try over and over and over to get it right. I'm no stranger to challenge. The community is not going to have fun with these unnerfed bosses in this Mythic raid. They already aren't. If you look at the stats on WoW Progress right now, I'll post this for Tettles to bring up. Oops, ignore that top part. You will see that there are 600 people past Brood Twister and 1,300 guilds on Brood Twister. That is a lot. And should people stay there? Maybe. But based on what Blizzard has said and what the community finds fun, I don't think a class stacking boss where you need 2 grips, 2 knocks, and have to dodge swirlies that are sometimes invisible is exactly the idea of a fun encounter. And so in that case, I think it needs to be nerfed.
Do you think there's an equivalency to what he's saying about relative to 10s?
Relative to 10s a little, but like 3 guilds killed Mythic and Surek, that hasn't been nerfed.
That's at 5.
Been calling for that to be nerfed.
5.
Okay, 5 now, sorry. But nobody has really, like, some people have said that should be nerfed. They haven't yet, and I think that's fine. I mean, that's kind of how I feel about it. I think there's some validity there. I don't claim to be the best person in the world, but I do think for the overall community, I do think that the raid needed to be nerfed because they nerfed Kaiveza, and that's still a fucking hard fight, as Ground Guild knows.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I'll save Squishy a little bit here. First of all, Blizzard just cares way more about the raid. Like, having a smooth, easy, like, normal progression curve through the raid is sort of what they want. And having, you know, really rigid, weird jumps in M+, while they'll get to it eventually and fix it, like, it's just not really on their priority list. Also, like, I think, you know, the fact that it is doable isn't necessarily, you know, we're not saying, oh, 10s are doable, therefore you should be able to do them. Like, you know, we're mainly saying, like, the difficulty like they want the difficulty to be high here, right? Where, like, I don't think they intended for the difficulty to be, you know, 300 pulls on Brood Twister or whatever. You know, I think that we're mainly saying, like, they're trying to make Mythic Plus harder. Is sort of like our, you know, and again, we're not, like, at the beginning of the episode, we're not trying to say, oh, we think it should be harder, blah, blah, blah. We're trying to help you guys interpret, like, sort of what they're doing and then, like, how you should think about things, right? If you want to continue having fun. Like, look, if you want to just, you know, yell and then hope they nerf it just so you can get your easier myth track loot. Like, I agree, the loot system feels really weird and they need to do something about it, but in general, like, we're not trying to say, like, oh, you have to get good and Raider, you know, blah, 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 or whatever. Like, I don't know. I think
I'm going to double down and bail Squishy out a little bit here. Squishy stated that these bosses needed nerfs after killing Brood Twister. Notably, he's also one of 148 guilds who have killed Nexus Princess, and about 1,000 guilds a tier get cutting edge and kill the final boss. He's saying that these fights need to be nerfed after killing them prior to a bunch of other guilds who normally kill them on a per tier basis, right? He is somebody who is actually less affected by these bosses need to be nerfed than the average person who's going to be trying to get cutting edge for the tier. So like I don't know. I feel like this one's not exactly that fair.
Yeah, I'm glad Squishy got one guy reading the comments before I did. Though. That's a good thing.
I can't believe you got called out for this. By the way,
it's fine. Like legitimately, like we all make dumb mistakes. Like we're all human. Like you could look at what's going on and look at the realism that this is going to be harder and start reframing your expectations. Or you can go in our podcast comments and make fun of Tettles jumping off an edge, growl on Nexus Prison Cabeza, or make fun of me for my comments.
Yeah,
I don't
actually, to add into that comment that I wanted to say, maybe to play devil's advocate against Squishy, I think sort of what he's saying too is like, okay, if you look at the raid, it's not about like no one's ever going to be that good, right? Like you can look at Brood Twister and like those current bosses, and they're literally at a state where like people just won't be that good. Like guilds will just quit before they kill those bosses. A lot of guilds will just quit before if they were to unnerf them, right? And I kind of feel like that's sort of what he's saying about M Plus is like people aren't just going to get way better and improve. Like a majority of people are just going to say, screw this, I'm just going to quit before I get Mythtrack gear. And then like, is that what you're saying, right? Like, okay, you're 619, you should just quit before you get Mythtrack gear. And like, that's sort of what we did say a little bit, right, in the last podcast. Not necessarily just you, but all of us, in a way of just like, you know, Blizzard says, if you want to get the highest rewards, then you have to do the hardest content. Oh, okay, Tettles trying to steal
Blizzard is saying that.
Right.
No. It's I'm not saying that. But it's not us that's saying it. It is Blizzard that is stating that.
Correct. Yeah, exactly. No. You're right. You're 100% right. That's not us saying get good. That's us saying Blizzard is telling you to get good, right? Like we're trying to convey their message. One thing I think they're just all over the place with their communication sometimes, and I feel like it would have gone a lot. Like one thing that I think where people got really confused and where things really were a pain point is the lack of communication from Blizzard, right? Because a lot of times dungeons or bosses just come out and they're just bullshit, and then Blizzard just fixes them and they just get better, right? So like people are looking at these dungeons and they're just like, dude, this 10 is bullshit. Like, is this what they want? Like, is Blizzard gonna fix this? And I feel like if Blizzard would have stepped in and been like, you know, okay, we're still looking for more data. We're going to do some tuning, but we're not quite sure how we want to move forward. Like in 1 week, we'll do a tuning post and we'll let you guys know. Or if they would have said, look, we want rewards to be really hard. Like the intention was that Mythtrack items are prestigious, like blah, blah, blah. But the fact is there was any communication from Blizzard, and it leaves us idiots here trying to like decipher what Blizzard wants and tell people.
Yeah.
When in reality, I think a lot of people could have been more at peace with the system if Blizzard would have just been more upfront. Because like, you know, let's say you're somebody who's hard stuck at 11s and 12s right now, right? Like we're telling people to make friends and get good or whatever. No, they should have just went AFK for a week and they come back and Blizzard nerfs the 12 affix and now they can start progging 12s, right? Like the fact of the matter is like no one needed to do anything except for just go AFK and raid log for the week and then come back and now 12s are nerfed. And it's like if Blizzard, you know, if we would have just had a little bit more communication that like, you know, they're going to look at it and change it, but we're just in the dark here. And I think that's the biggest failure point of the difficulty is I just wish they would have talked more about their goals for the season and rewards and all that, as opposed to just like, you know, randomly being like, okay, you get Gilded Crests from 8, goodbye. And then they leave again. It's like, huh?
If you go back and listen to some of our like pretty early episodes, like episode like 3, 4, and 5 before the expansion even came out, we were kind of laughing that we thought that dungeons were just like straight across the board over-designed and too hard, and we're like, dude, people are gonna struggle, and we kept saying it. We're like, people are gonna struggle. We joked about people sitting in Dawnbreaker screenshots where they're just wiped of death, have like 130 deaths, and it's crazy. It wasn't Dawnbreaker. But people are struggling at those keys, and they're like finding 10s to be impossible, just like we were saying was going to happen prior to the expansion coming out. It's not us being like, yeah, you need to get good. It's literally Blizzard being like, you aren't good enough. You're not good enough for this. Which, I don't know. All right. I think this is the last one. I think we're going to end up like running into we have some Q&A. So last comment to read. It says, hi Bench, don't know if you'll get this far. I'm an AOTC guild leader with a lot of players who get portals and stop. We don't usually venture into Mythic Raid because we're on the smaller side. None of us have issues with the gear being where it is because it gives us a chance to prog and learn the dungeons. But we think the difficulty curve and progression both feel way off as soon as you hit the minus 15 second Challenger's Peril debuff. The dungeons are tough but don't feel impossible, but a magnification of small mistakes that we normally laugh off has a serious chilling effect on our players, and most are only raid logging for now. I think to me, this is like the most concerning part because, like, I don't know about you guys, but my content personally does a lot better whenever people are having more fun and more engaged with the Mythic Plus system. And so the fact that they're like, yeah, we're just going to raid log. These dungeons are way too punishing because of the minus 15 seconds. And honestly, the dungeon mechanics themselves are being too punishing. That to me is concerning.
I think a lot of it comes from the discussion we had last time of the Challenger's Peril affix. And I mean, the inclination is, like, there's two sides of it. One is for the anxious player. Whenever you die to do something stupid to make a small mistake, you feel real bad.
Yeah,
like it feels real bad. You're like, damn, I just let my team down just because like I moved out of this really slowly or something like that. And that feels incredibly bad. But also, if somebody else does that, it is very easy for a lot of players to immediately show frustration to that. Especially in pugs. And so, like, I think the death timer affix, whether or not it's good for the game, is up for debate. But what it does to player behavior has caused it to cause a lot of anxiety for players who are afraid of making a single mistake, as this person said.
Okay.
We had a Siege 15. It was almost going to be our second 15 that we had time. The timer was pretty tight. It wasn't a clean run. Settles already knows what happened.
Dude, I was like, I was just laughing. I'm like, this is the least relatable thing of all time. This guy just talked about his Siege 15.
Oh, yeah. So we kill the third boss and we're running downstairs. We're like, all right, timer's really tight, but we can do this. And one of our players, I'm not going to name any names, gets hit by a wave and dies. Minus 15. And then also we have to res. And so that takes 8 seconds. And then we deplete the key by 20 seconds. And that certainly felt very bad. And the person made it clear that if they would, they said it themselves. They're like, if I didn't get hit by that wave, we would have timed that key, which, like, gosh, does that feel bad? I think they missed with the Challengers, whatever, Peril is it called? The timer. I think that the combat res system is very, very good. I think that people randomly dying definitely feels like it has consequences. You have a very limited amount of reses that you can use. When you use them all and you have 0, it definitely creates like a heightened oh no situation. Like, we got to be careful. When you have 3, it feels good that you played the run clean and you can go into the end of the dungeon and you have lots of reses to use. I understand that there was an issue with the timer balance, with dungeons having way too much time and people like wiping 4 times or whatever, but I think that they just missed with the Challenger's Peril and it didn't quite do what they wanted it to do. And I think that they need to go back to the drawing board here with the 7 affix. I don't really know how to fix it exactly, but I think it's to me, it just feels like a really sloppy fix for this HP scaling. Like, mobs just don't quite have enough HP. The packs die pretty quick, and then it's like, well, okay, now the timer's free, and then it's like we need to punish players more, and it's like it just like it's just not there. I think they it's not quite cooked enough. It needs to go back into the kitchen. We need to figure out, because I 100% agree that as you go into higher keys, we need some sort of like way to make it so you want to have a clean run. But I think the dying is just so punishing in WoW, and the other big problem
dying's
is
already terrible. Like, I don't know.
And there's also such a wide variety of deaths, right? Like, if you have a death and you get instantly combat res, it costs you nothing. But if you have no combat reses and your team has to finish the boss,
your tank,
with 2 DPS, or your tank dies, or like there's like a death can be minus 15 seconds or it can be minus a minute and a half, even without any death timer, right? Like, just depending on what happens. And I think that, unfortunately, like, yeah, I don't know. The other side of the coin, though, is like, how many of these keys would have been depleted anyway, even if the death timer didn't happen? Like, you have the death timer and you realize that you're screwed, but like, would you have just gotten screwed later anyway, but you just didn't go further in the dungeon to see? Like, I don't know. I think either way, I think they need to relook at the death penalty thing. Although I do say that, if you're talking about, hey, we need to be able to recover from wipes and learn from mistakes or whatever, like, in 7s and 8s and 9s, like I feel like you should know the dungeon and not be like, it shouldn't really be a learning key, or rather, if it is a learning key, you shouldn't expect to upgrade it, And I think that there's something to be said there for like, yeah, I don't know. It's just tough because there's so many different punishments for death depending on how they die and where the checkpoints are. I feel like if they would have made it so all of the checkpoints are very good, I think that people might be looking at this Challenger Peril thing in a different way. So one funny dungeon that you mentioned earlier is the Dawnbreaker, and how the Dawnbreaker dungeon actually doesn't feel like the timer's that bad, right? And one of the things about Dawnbreaker is when you res, you can get to anywhere in the dungeon within 10 seconds. You can just mount up right at the start, fly right to there, dragon riding, and bam, you're there. And so, like, the Dawnbreaker actually has a perfect respawn timer system, and having Challenger's Peril in the Dawnbreaker doesn't feel bad. And even full wiping, while it's like rough, you can still full wipe in Dawnbreaker and come back and time it. But like in Stone Vault, you're just dead. Like if you just wipe, near Skarmorak or whatever because you accidentally pull the guy, you're just dead. Like you have a 5-minute run back or whatever. Yeah, and so I think they need, if they want to go ahead with this Challenger, and we've been playing Mythic Plus long enough to know that they're not going to change their graveyards. Like why, I don't know, but they just won't. And so if they want to go ahead with keeping this Challenger's Peril thing, they need to change their graveyards. I don't think they can have both terrible graveyards and Challenger's Peril. And I think, to be honest, Challenger's Peril sort of doesn't even feel as bad as the bad graveyards,
So,
like if you wipe the Skarmorak and then you lose minus 1.5 minute, but then you press release and you're right there and you just pull the boss again, like that might, I would rather have that actually than have to run all the way back.
The interesting thing is, I came to a very similar conclusion that you did this morning. I was running a follower dungeon of all things for the weekly rep. I was running for the rep.
Right, this is more relatable for our audience than
I was running for rep, and I pulled way too much. The tank was terrible, like any other pug.
Well, yeah, he's a follower tank.
Yeah, I died because he did whole aggro. But anyways, right. I died, and the healer immediately reses you, like immediately on their location. Like it's not even close. And I was just kind of thinking, like, the Challenger's Peril has a lot of benefits, in my opinion, from a game dev perspective, and probably from Blizzard's perspective. It holds DPS accountable and incentivizes a something on the clock. And so is the issue actually with Challenger's Peril, or is it more with the fact that Challenger's Peril is doubling down on, as Grell said, bad graveyards and runbacks? What would Mythic Plus look like if whenever you died, you took the death penalty and you just got to come back up again?
Yeah, imagine if when you press release spirit, everyone just releases at their corpse, and then you have like a 10-second of invulnerability that breaks if you attack anything, and you could just like reposition.
Yeah,
like a beast or whatever.
That could be a really, like, I doubt they would do this. This is a
they would never do. That's the problem with this whole thing, is that's why everyone just says delete Challenger's Peril, and I hate to be like supporting it, but we just know that they're never going to do it. Like
because this would be a better change, but they would never do that because I mean, to them there's fantasy involved in being battle res, and to us we're just
there's fantasy
involved. How inconvenient.
Walking back to Skarmorak as your mage, just like, I never get any heals. I'm sick of Resto Druids. Oh, I love this fantasy. Hey, idiot, why don't you curse the spell?
But yeah, I think that's the major issue. It's just that you die and then you go, like, you run back. But if it was like you die, you take a 15-second penalty, you come right back up and you're in your fight, I don't think people would care as much.
Yeah.
So in that case, is Challenger's Peril actually the issue? Or is it Challenger's Peril stacked with something else the way it works? And I think it's just kind of the double dipping going on right now.
Yep.
So people are very much focused on Challenger's Peril because that's the new thing. That's the thing that changed. That's the thing that is causing this to them because that's what's happened. But in reality, I think Challenger's Peril isn't the worst thing. But in the way and the way it interacts with other systems is the big issue right now.
Can you
imagine?
I'm down for a mile of Reddit posts complaining about the checkpoint system. Please. Please.
Can you imagine if like your group had like a mobile graveyard, like every 5 minutes you can press a mobile graveyard button or something like that. You can put your checkpoint
You're cooking too much, man. We're coming up with too many good ideas here, I think.
Like, you put it right before the boss so that if you die, you just res right at the start. Like, oh, that'd be
I think
great.
Gilded Crests should just drop from 7s. I think that'll fix the problem.
That'll probably solve the problem that these people are having. Yeah, good point. Oh, God. All right. Let's talk about some of the cool stuff that we've seen this week. And I will start first. If you have a DK in your group, they're very popular this season. You should invite one. You can focus a target and then you can focus a target and then target the target that you would like to put the Subduing Grasp debuff onto. And then you would focus Grip, say, this Web Mage while having the boss targeted, in this instance here, and that will activate the second boss of Ara-Kara. And you might think, what are you going to do with that? That doesn't do anything. For some reason, this boss likes to snap you. And he will snap your entire team into his lair. And this will allow you to save about 15 seconds worth of time as opposed to doing like a rescue skip over the wall. Which, it's not very important, but I thought it was cool.
Yeah. My cool thing this week is, so there's the Severed Threads buff coming soon. And you collect currency from from bosses in Nerubar Palace.
Yes.
Every boss that you collect, you get 1, except on Mythic, you collect 2. So you don't necessarily need to clear Heroic every boss with your entire guild, as long as people get, some amount of bosses.
Is it true that you can just like bank them up on your ult and then transfer them to your main to like get it completed every single week?
So it's one per boss per warband. So if you get, Olgrax on your first character, Olgrax will not drop any more on your second character. So it's 8. So if you do like 8 heroic bosses, you get 8. But if you do Mythic, then you get another certain amount.
What if
which can be banked?
What if you're doing 4 than 4? Like what if you save 4
so
on
you
your
get 12. So you can only carry a max of 8. So you'd have to transfer it to your ult.
Yes.
Yeah, and then you can have 12 going into next week. Yeah.
So you would be able to get that before you like start your prog for that week or whatever.
Theoretically.
Do your reclear. Okay, I see.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Ooh, I have one that I just thought of. This has been something that I've been using in dungeons that I think owns, and everyone just spams my Twitch chat. And now I just give it to my friends to get their Twitch chat spammed because everyone's so confused. So previously in Shadowlands, every single dungeon was so freaking bright, and you would use inky black potions to not be blinded. Now every single dungeon is a dark spider cavern lair that's very, very dark. And if you use a consumable called Stinky Bright Potion, it lets you see. It basically just I can't even explain it. It just removes all of the dark. Like it only works in outdoor dungeons. Yeah, there's a screenshot right there. And it looks very, very cool in the 2 spider dungeons, Ara-Kara and City of Threads. It makes Siege look like a bright shining, like Azeroth was brand new. It doesn't work in indoor dungeons like Stone Vault, but any outdoor dungeons, this potion's actually really, really cool. So if you want to either see clear or just look cool or just troll your streamer friends and get them to turn it on so they get spam with questions for the entire run, that is a great consumable to use.
Hold on, wait a second. I think I need this for my chat interactions. A good point.
Yeah, no, they're very, very good for baiting chat interaction. My regular viewers are just getting so frustrated. They just spam Stinky Bright Potion over and over again for the whole dungeon. Now I have a chat command for it and everything, but it actually looks really, really nice.
Huh.
All right, nice. And
the weekly podcast.
The weekly podcast.
Look at this at the top.
changes.
This news is not available to the public.
Oh.
Queen Ansarek tuning coming October 15th. All right, what did you see? What did you see here, Squishy?
Holy moly.
Yeah, they are nerfing Heroic and Mythic Queen Ansarek.
Good, I couldn't kill this boss during Pugs. It's good for me.
Yeah, it's definitely one of the harder bosses. So Frothy Toxin damage reduced by 15%. I believe that is the debuff that you get for popping the froth, and that's the one that increments for every person that is in the wrong froth. So this will make it more lenient if you decide somebody is for the people who decide to go in the other one for some reason. Gloomblast damage reduced by 50% on heroic difficulty. That is the phase 2 dispel. There's a lot of damage on those 2 dispels on the second platform. When it's combined with the web pull, this should just make it slightly easier. And a massive change for boosters. When calculating applications of Frothy Toxin, only living players are now counted. Because previously, when anybody was dead, they were counted as missing from the soak, which means that you got higher applications of Frothy Toxin. This is really good for Mythic difficulty because it was impossible to prog phase 2 with a single person dead, basically.
Dude, these Mythic changes are fucking crazy too.
I had a random weird theory because of that change. I actually thought they purposefully wanted to make boosting hard or reduce it when they added that, because basically the way it works for people that don't know is every person that you have dead in phase 1 just makes you take more damage, and eventually you just have, if you have too many people dead, you'll just die. You can't get past the mechanics. And generally when you're doing boosting on complicated bosses, you just tell the person to tag the boss and run off the ledge or whatever, just so they don't get mechanics. And I thought they actually made this mechanic purposefully to make boosting more annoying, and I thought that was really, really based, but apparently not. And apparently they're like, sorry guys, you can't boost on this boss. Let us fix this right now. Okay, here you go. Now you can have people on the floor in phase 1 and still kill the boss, which is, I guess, probably fine for pugs, especially since phase 1 was the most difficult part. But at the same time, like, if you can't get out of phase 1 without, with people dead and no battle res, it's like, should you... I don't know. I think that's a little bit of a weird change to me, but...
I think it's nice. Like, I don't think griefing the player base is worth stopping boosters, because there's a way around it anyways. People have found a way around it. So
okay, well, never mind then.
You were just
so basically, if you overlap the circles,
right?
yeah, if you Venn diagram them and pop them at exactly the same time within like 0.4 seconds of each other, the people in the middle count as both. So that's how you get around it in boosts. So it didn't matter anymore anyways. So like, I think this is the best solution because it was just kind of griefing normal guilds who just had people dead on the floor.
That's fair. And I guess you get to progress and see the later stages of the fight.
Exactly. These mythic nerfs are pretty significant. Although that's what I said about the Kaiveza nerfs too, and that fight is still mega hard with insane healing. So, yeah, I mean, Queen Anthrax health reduced by 5%. That's always going to be good. I mean, I think Liquid still had the fastest kill of the 5, and there's only been 5 kills, so that's going to help guilds out a lot to make sure that they don't need the perfect comp. They can, have more commit to the ads a little more, stuff like that. Frothy Toxin damage, and gonna be good. Silken Tomb health reduced by 20%.
This is crazy, by the way. Shadowgate cast time increased by 20%, so that's the portal and the P2
that's the portal, which has the dispel, so 20% less dispels, which is good, and the damage of that dispel reduced by 25%.
And the rest damage, like the P2 intermission was by far the hardest part of this fight.
Absolutely.
And so I think that, reducing the damage of this entire phase is great.
The one interesting thing is Silken Tomb health reduced by 20%. That one's weird. Because you played, I think, a maximum of 4 Silken Tombs on the entire fight. Because of their lineups, Silken Tombs on Mythic, you must root break every single one on the 1st, the 2nd, the 4th, and most of your raid must break on the 3rd. So, reducing it by 20%, I'm pretty sure doesn't solve it, because if you're rooted, even with 20% less health, you can't place the Frothy Toxin in the right spot.
Yeah, the issue is getting the Frothy Toxin in the right spot. But in addition to that as well, it's like there's only certain specs that can actually do damage to them too, and so you're kind of forced to be comp stacked. And like, if you have too many people, then it kind of like there's also like a timer, because if you don't get out of the root in time, then you get hit by the web. The lines that cross the ground. I don't remember.
Yeah, the web blades. Yeah,
web blades. Yeah, you get hit by the web blades, and it's just like, oh my god.
Yeah, the problem with that, I don't think, is the health. That's a weird one to me. It's the problem with just the lineups suck, so you're forced to just break all of them. And then some phase 3 stuff. Acolyte's Essence, that's the orb you pick up, reduced by 15%. Essence Scar duration reduced by 50%. That is the debuff that you get when you pick up the Essence, I'm pretty sure, which is really interesting. Because now it's only 2 minutes, which means you can pick up the 1st and the 3rd set of Acolytes. Which means you don't need your entire raid to pick up anymore.
Oh yeah, because this got removed from 4 minutes down to 2. That's good.
Yeah, so that means you can pick up the 1st and the 3rd now, which makes things a lot easier.
This was a crazy mechanic for Race World First to watch, by the way.
The fact that you needed 2 people to take like 8 million damage a second was insane.
Yeah, that was one of the mechanics of all time for sure.
And then reduced health by 15% on the Acolytes and the Shackles, and then 10% damage nerf on the Shackle impact. Just, these feel like the Kaibeza nerfs, which seem really big, but that is how overtuned these fights were for the majority of the population on Mythic already, I think.
Sang said he thought this was the hardest fight of all time, so like just for point of reference.
I think this is still an insane fight, to be honest. So, Grau, have you looked at Mythic Queen at all?
Very briefly. I think I'm on board with your analysis of, it looks like a big nerf, but at the same time, like, also Presevoker got nerfed. Like, we look at every single guild that's killed it so far, and they've used one or more Presevokers, and I think that, like, they do kind of need to do sweeping damage changes with how OP Prez has been. I don't know. I'm happy to see tuning to what was the hardest boss of all time, especially what's been happening to my guild. And I'm just focused on Kaiveza right now. But yeah, I think I've been looking at Queen's Court. Queen's Court definitely looks like a very, very interesting boss as well.
Queen's Court.
I've heard that it's not necessarily difficult. It's just like a lot of stuff to memorize. And I received my Queen's Court pamphlet yesterday, and I have all the slides and slides and slides and positions and numbers, and just feels like I'm working a job at this point, Mythic rating, except for usually jobs don't have things that are this complicated. So yeah, looking forward to all the future raid bosses. But the thing is, I've actually been it's hard because I like the fact that the first few bosses of the raid have been so chill and being able to do them on alts or whatever. And it's like, I don't know. I think it's okay, with the way Mythtrack works, with the way that you can get gear from 10s and from the early bosses and upgrade it up. And there's the Severed Threads buff. Like, I'm not really dreading the end bosses too much. Also, I do want to say someone made fun of me in the comments when I said pugging the bosses or whatever. Like, oh, just pug the Mythic raid. Growl is so stupid, blah, blah, blah. It's like, I'm just trying to give you guys good ideas. Like, you guys don't realize how much free loot. Like, literally someone in the comments that we read said, like, oh, like, I do 10s in Mythic raid and the first few bosses feel so much easier. Like, they literally use the phrase loot pinata for the first few bosses in Mythic. It's like, yeah, you guys were smart enough to figure that out. Like, there's actually so many community runs. There's a joke now, Drogo, our guild leader, just raid leads a run literally every day of the week.
Well, it's because he is.
Yeah, he literally is. Like, there's one or two in one of the NA discords. There's one or two that we run. Like, there's so many pugs, and obviously, like, if you don't know as many people, then it'll be hard. But that's where I'm literally giving you guys the tip to get your nose in the air and look for these things and get in them while they form before all of them are locked down, because this is like super, super good loot. I know that was a little bit off topic, but yeah, very happy to see the nerfs. I don't know. I haven't done Queen's Court or Queen Ansurek, so I don't really know, to say what should be nerfed, but obviously they should be nerfed because I want to kill them and be done with them.
Okay,
so.
We are 2 hours into the pod. Do we want to do Q&A? Do we want to save it for like next week?
Rapid fire Q&A. Let's do it.
Braceth Asith asks, how do you feel about gear acquisition now that we're into the season, not just theorizing ahead of time? Too much gear from delves. I think that's kind of created a weird situation where it's difficult to actually feel meaningful progression from gear acquisition over the course of the entire season. I think that the upper end of Mythic Plus is a little bit too difficult relative to what like 619 item level ends up looking like. But in terms of like the gear acquisition process, I think that also, myth track acquisition and only having 90 crests with a 6 out of 6 myth track also is like way slower. It's a lot slower than it was in Dragonflight.
Yeah, it feels stupid. Hero track, way too easy to get. It feels like for lower end people, there's no progression. You just get all the hero track gear in the crest. For high end people, it feels like you're massively drip fed gear. You get one mythic piece from your vault. You get your Gilded Crest that you have to slam immediately into that piece. It feels very, very weird. I like that I have gear to look forward to in the future, but it just overall doesn't really feel... It's not really impeding me. Like, I'm not annoyed by the process. It just doesn't really feel right.
I think we already covered it. I think the early start was a little rough, but like the top end, there's progression now.
Yeah. Jason White asks, what if they put spells and wands that would make people want to use them? For instance, Magic Dispersing Wand would have a massive spell effect. The possibilities are endless, and casters could bring something to the dungeon that might be missing from their current composition. So not
Blizzard
even
doesn't want that. They
Yeah.
put things in the dungeon on purpose because they want you to bring those classes. Everyone always suggests, oh, why don't you give my class something so I can do it? No, they don't want that. They put these, like, people are like, oh, why don't you give every healer every dispel? It's like, there's a reason that there's poisons, diseases, curses, is because they want you to think about that. Is that good for the game? I don't know. I find it kind of annoying that, like, I'm playing with 4 friends and we're like, oh, we can't do this dungeon, but that's what Blizzard wants. And they want you to look at the dungeon and think about the tools and invite classes accordingly. So they will not, like, they won't really do that.
Mech asks, Squishy, now that you've played with Og for a bit, what are your thoughts on its place in the game?
I've played Og for like 5 dungeons. I'm gonna pass it to you because you've played more Og than I have.
This expansion? Well, you played a lot last expansion. Anyways, all right. I think that support is an inherently pretty cool thing for Mythic Plus in general. I think that Og is just incredibly overkitted in a lot of ways that are problematic for 5-man content. I also think it is complete bullshit in Raid and would be incredibly unfun having to do homework for lining up your cooldowns perfectly for a spec like that. That's just pretty stupid. I think it's kind of similar to like Rise in League of Legends, where Rise was reworked like 4 or 5 times because it was consistently the most overpowered champion for top end pro play, but completely worthless for like the average player base, to the point where a 43% win rate champion was being picked in pro play because it was so overtuned. And Og Evoker is kind of a similar vein, where if you do all of the right stuff, you're doing you're min-maxing your Ebon Might uptime, you're actually hard picking your presciences, you're looking at who you should be buffing when you're buffing them for both Raid and Mythic Plus. The spec is completely dominant, way too good whenever you're like a good player, and way too bad whenever you're a bad player. And I think it's stupid.
I think it fills a nice niche. I think that
I like playing
Raid,
it.
if you're a tryhard raider, like, look, I mean, whatever, like, just deal with it. Like, some people will play it. If you're a lower end raider, more casual, I think you're not doing any of that stuff, and it won't matter. I think that one of the cool things about being a healer is that you're not judged for your numbers, and you're judged about doing the mechanics and staying alive. And I think that's a cool thing about Og, is you just do the things you need to do. And you know, if you're like in some noob guild, you just buff the 2 people who are the best players the whole time, and that's probably the best thing you can do. So I actually don't think it's so bad in Raid. Personally, I definitely don't find it as fun. It feels like, I don't know, I can't really explain why, but I prefer playing almost any of my other characters than Og, but I'll still play it. Like, it's still whatever. But I think the problem is the tuning in M+. It's that damage is too high and that your damage doesn't matter as much. I think we're slowly, the world is slowly healing as we tune the dungeons and we change the affixes, but I think still that you either need Og or you need like a bunch of classes that bring very good defensive buffs, you know, Rogue, Poison, plus Mark of the Wild, plus Fortitude, you know, plus whatever, you know, Shaman stuff. The HP is that it sort of feels like the meta, but ultimately, like, that's a high key thing. I think for the average population, I think Og is in a really good spot, and I actually,
I agree.
I you know, it's annoying for us at the high end, but unfortunately, I think, you know, there are certain classes like that will always be annoying.
And for me, I would rather play Og and get invited than play my Moonkin and sit in Dornegal. So, like, that's gonna be. All right, last question. Kathu asks, do you think there's an issue with a large number of the WoW content creators being in this higher bracket of keys where affixes get turned off?
I'm going to say no, because that's probably just the content creators you follow. There are a lot of content creators that are not in that bracket.
Damn! Holy smokes! Get roasted.
There's nothing wrong with that.
Get roasted.
He said you only watch good players.
There's nothing wrong with that. People are at various skill levels, and people are going to watch people of what they aspirational or people that they find entertaining. And I think there are a number of content creators who do just fine doing 10s or lower. The people who just have fun on stream doing 5s or 6s. It's just up to the content creator, and I think it's just you're in an echo chamber.
Yeah,
like,
yeah. I'm actually
this podcast.
Yeah, I'm gonna take the other side. I think it's actually a good thing. I think a lot of content creators are like very results driven, very competitive, very serious, and should probably shut the heck up about what should be the average person's progression experience. And I think that having all of us goblins quarantined into the no affix world and letting Blizzard have fun and experiment with different affixes is cool, and I think that's better for most people. And I think it's good for the game that all of us aren't in there. I think that you know, they can just you don't, because one big problem that I hear is I always see people echo what content creators say, even if they have no idea why, or if it doesn't affect them, or they're just not right. And so I think that, you know, now content creators just aren't going to be listing their elitist opinionated things about low keys, and everyone everyone who's playing them can just form their own opinions and have fun, and then Blizzard can judge them based off of how they play, as opposed to, you know, how me and J.B heal the keys. Because I don't think any healer doing a +6 wants things to be tuned the way that I or JB want them to be tuned.
And for me, I'm going to go and watch my favorite streamer, Liquid Maximum, complete 9s on stream.
Yeah, he's so in touch with the community.
Yeah, because he's in touch with the community. Exactly. Yep. He's a real one. Fuck Potty C. Goodbye.
Fuck Potty C. Goodbye.